That takes training in some ways, I think. I have a hard time.
Did you get started with it?
When? Yeah. I tried it 3 years ago. Yeah. I was in Yasuragi and I started to do it there, and it really was nice and worked for me. And then I tried it even before, but it just didn't work. I didn't get the right entrance. And for me, it was too fluffy in the beginning. There were too many trainings which were very like fluffy and feel your chakra and so on. I don't know if you're already live, but it didn't really quite work for me. Yeah. For me, the Sam Harris approach of it being less, much more mindful, more scientific. That's something that works. So.
I think some people certainly abuse. There is this, I don't want to say the name, but another type of meditation that they charge like 10,000 crowns to just get, what do you call it? You get your own, I don't want to say it, but I think people try to make money from this when it's not really, it's not something you really need to pay for. And like Sam Harris, which have, their own app for helping people to do this, and a lot of videos on YouTube. I think people can get started with it very easily.
Yeah,
but I want to get more into the in quotation mark real meditation and all this. But I have found another way of meditating over the years. I realize, and that is to do the type of sports that requires you to be absolutely 100% focused on what you're doing. So it's a difference if you go out running, you can process. If you go out surfing, there is no processing. There is only, timing and doing everything to the perfect execution. Otherwise you fall off the wave. So those kind of sports, mountain biking, downhill, or so a little bit action sports oriented. But for me, it's a meditative space because it fundamentally clears my head on anything else than exactly being in the moment. But that's, I don't classify that as meditation, but for me it has some sort of meditative effect on clearing my head. I don't get that from running, by the way.
Look, as we said before, it's usually meditation is not meant to be only for 10 minutes. It's meant to be for 24 hours type thing, right? Because you're there, you're aware, you're noticing. And it's actually also a slight misconception that it is about not thinking about anything. That's not the idea. It's just you do everything you do, but you step back a little bit and you become aware. You notice that you think about something and that you feel something. And that gives you a different perspective on who you are, and also this illusion of the self. This whole question is very fascinating, relating in fact a lot to AI too, in fact.
But let me ask both of you then, why did you start meditating, or why are you continue doing it? What is your driver?
I can start, and it would be interesting to hear your view as well, Christian. But for me, at least, it gives a clarity of mind and a way to focus, I think, that is really useful. And it's also a way to, I get, 1,000 ideas and thoughts in my head all the time. That can be stressful unless you know or train your mind to handle that. And for me, it's a way to, get relaxed, get some kind of more holistic view of thoughts, and, focus your mind and get relaxed, even though you get so many ideas all the time in your head. What about you, Christian?
Yeah, for me, it has more to do with exploring the self, understanding myself. There is a difference when you go back to Jung and the idea of the self and the ego and the way you portray yourself to the world, the way you think you are, and the way you want to be looked at by others versus who you really are deep inside. What is your values? What is it you should be achieving? Who are you really? What fulfills you? What makes you happy? And I noticed there's actually almost always a huge gap. Like we do not know, I think, who we really are, and what we and so that requires some awareness and also some listening skills about where you are,
listening to yourself,
exactly. And so this gap, understanding what, for example, your values truly are and how you're acting in the world. If you can get these two things together closer, theoretically you should be a more balanced individual.
Is that the end goal, to get more balance in your life? Or
I think I want to live the life that I'm meant to be living according to how I'm structured. It's just so damn hard getting closer to the inner structures of your psychology in some sense.
What do you really What is driving you? On this note, have you studied or anyone heard about Ikigai? The Japanese Ikigai, it means to find your purpose in life. And basically, the hypothesis is that if you can make the different circles, like what are you passionate about? What can you make a living out of? What does society need? And if you can get those circles to starting to, how you find your inner why, and then with that inner why, having that, match what you're good at, what you want to do, and what is great for society. It's sort of, I find that interesting when we go in this path to find the inner why and how that aligns up. And sometimes it doesn't, of course.
No, sometimes it doesn't. And I haven't heard of it. I wanted to add also with the meditation, the other part is perhaps also to increase the quality of your experience because you're more aware of it. Yeah, right. It's essentially, there's also this, if you want to call it the training of the mind versus the training of the body. I mean, that is very obvious. You go to the gym, you go to sats and push your weights or wherever you might be. But training your mind means that you have an awareness of it, right? And you...
I like that.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. I wish more people did both. And I wish I did more. I do some kind of, mental training, but I do far too little physical training myself, especially in these Corona times. It's hard to... Meditation
for me has been about, I think, very similar angles starting. You have 1,000 ideas. And it's the negative side, the two negatives around that for me has been, one part, when it gets too much, you have a hard time sleeping. You get insomnia from it. I've had not bad, but I had experiences where we all have it when we have so many good ideas and we realize, shit, I can't stop thinking about it. And this is one. I think the other one is to find focus. So with the consciousness and the mind and finding that inner understanding, it guides focus. And not only that, it also helps you control your mind to stay in focus. So for me, the two main drivers has been focus and sort of, I guess relaxation or something like that. But this is a way to...
Actually, for me, if I may just say a last word on that, although I think actually it could be part of the theme for AI too, it's for me, it's almost the opposite. I have realized how a complete mess my head is. Because if you do meditate and you realize you cannot predict at all your next thought, you can't. I challenge anyone, right? So literally just calming down and then thinking, when is the next thought starting and when is it ending? You realize that your minds are shooting in all directions all the time, boom, boom, boom. That's and this illusion of I think control is a big word. It's very hard.
I wasn't using the word control, but because I think you're absolutely right. But for me, I think when you are aware of it and you want to stay in the flow, this is sort of step one to. I guess steer it, but I understand what you...
And it's also interesting, I think, how the mind is so irrational sometimes, much more than people think, and actually has a lot of limitations that people, it's not the general AI or intelligence that some people think. But that's another topic of discussion, perhaps. And I like your comment about, the similarities between what is the definition of meditation versus AI. So I'm adding that to the list here. Let's get back to that shortly. But before that, we would love to welcome you here.
Thank you so much.
Christian Guttmann, one of the superstars in AI in Nordics, the global head of AI at Tieto. You're a professor, an adjunct professor at the University of Sydney, right?
New South Wales.
Yeah.
New South Wales in Sydney.
Yeah.
Yes.
Exactly.
He's from Australia as well, so he knows the details.
Lived there for a while.
So. Okay. Yeah.
We have an Australian topic on camera, of course.
Okay. Good. Let's discuss.
But so many more things. I mean, you're a research fellow at Karolinska Institute and founder of Nordic AI Institutes and so many more things. And you have a huge following on LinkedIn and more. I mean, it's amazing. So we're very proud to have you here.
Thank you so
Christian.
much. Yeah.
And let's start with, how would you describe yourself? Who is Christian Guttmann? How would you describe it?
As a professional, if I start there, as a professional, I would say I am very, very technology interested with a strong entrepreneurial mindset. So very interested in seeing how artificial intelligence and other very novel technology can be used for society and for business, and also how it brings us forward. So the bigger questions, philosophical questions, how can we transcend humanity? That's sort of everything comes for me as a package. But that's probably in short. I'm very fascinated. I'm reading all the articles. I write scientific articles on that end, and then also at the same time supporting startups, working at TietoEVRY, bringing the Nordic and the European AI system a step forward wherever I can. Humbly, because obviously it's a huge system. So, but yeah.
That sounds great. But if we go back perhaps to your initial beginning and your studies as well, how did your interest in AI get started?
Yeah, early on, I was one of those that started programming when I was like 13. I have one of these computers and hacked along. I started starting a company when I was 16 and built an intelligent database. So I know my first customers, very local customers. We were looking at how we can build intelligent databases. So it was already back then an opportunity to bring data into some business structure.
And what year was this approximately, without revealing your age, but still?
What my age was?
What year were you 16 years old, so to speak?
Beginning 90s.
Beginning of 90s, yes.
Yeah. So all during that time, and then I was influenced by a couple of movies, they interested me. This journey of psychology, or like how our mind works. Why are we acting the way we do? And could we potentially translate that into a machine? So movies and books, such as, from Stanislav Lem, or even more mundane movies or series like Knight Rider or War Games. These are movies where I thought, wow, could a machine have so much charisma, personality, and power to be a companion, to be someone to really reckon with, in dialogue. So these have sort of shaped my thinking around it. And ever since I've been speaking about it too much for most of my friends' taste, I would say. Yeah.
That sounds really cool. And in some way you got started, you mentioned the Intelligent Databases project. Can you just explore or elaborate a bit more perhaps? What was that really about?
Look, it was small, right? Yeah. I was 16, so it's not like I built a huge Google or so, but essentially we were working with local companies, trades companies. So they were offering, everything from painting and so on. And they were smaller companies, 50, 60 people, were essentially looking at, and they were very new to this whole computer world and data world, right? So they heard of databases and they heard of computers. And so we discussed this. I remember we were sitting in the kitchen and we're laying out how we could use relational database schemes and add algorithms to it in order to. And my approach was to pretty much build the whole thing from scratch. So pretty much what Oracle and those companies would have done, over a long period of time. But these were the discussions. I think my fascination back in those days was much more on the technology and the algorithms and building that. Before that, by the way, I built some games and algorithms, which I sort of, sold to small magazines and so on, together with friends. And at that time I was also very active in the scene. So there was, I guess now it's out of date. So I can say this hacking and cracking scene, in Europe. Maybe you were also involved.
I was in the hacking and cracking scene for sure.
Exactly right. Huge fascination. Probably one of the huge educational waves that swept through Europe when we were still in a very undigitized world, but we educated ourselves. So we had a lot of connections to Luxembourg and Turkey and the Netherlands, right? There was always in Venlo and these places, these parties where you met and essentially started building something which is similar to the one in the US now. What is it called? it's a big event where the FBI comes and they're hacking the phones.
Oh yeah, with a black hat or
black hats
or white hats.
It's DEF CON.
Yeah, DEF CON. Yeah,
yeah. So it's a very big event. So that sort of spirit, and that introduced me into this world. And naturally, you know, when you build systems that can be really smart and all this, and that sort of set my frame of thinking.
What do you think? You know, if we do a small sidetrack here, I mean, it's a lot of happening right now in cybersecurity area with ransomware back and forth all the time. What's any thoughts about that? Do you think? Yeah. What's your thoughts about that?
I have a lot of thoughts, and I know firsthand. I don't know if I should name too many companies, but I think there's so many now that got affected in just the last 2 months. I could name at least 8 or so, and I think this is clearly a symptom of. This is something which can be done quite easily because the digital arena, many communer and governments and companies they have a basic setup when it comes to the security and building. And then, of course, when you're attacking something on a bigger scale, it should be done. It's certainly done and supported by AI and intelligence because you can
from both direction, right? You can use AI to
precisely
and to defend as well.
Exactly right. And if there is a big if on the attacker side, you just use an AI that hacks into a system, into a network, it will do it 1,000 times faster than a human could ever do, right? Because it checks all the ports, it various things. And if you're not ready for it on the other side, you're just heavily disadvantaged. And this is a concern that I'm having now generally with Europe when it comes to AI and this cybersecurity, IoT, these topics that we're not so much up to speed. We're an easier target, let's put it this way.
So, easy to continue on this track. But if we just end it with, if you don't want to have the same experience as Kalix kommun, the municipality had, what would be your best advice for like a startup if they want to at least have some kind of cybersecurity?
Well, it always depends what type of company it is, right? Like if it is a startup that deals with sort of online and real-time information and has direct API connections with a healthcare provider, I would strongly recommend to be sure that you have plenty of big walls. If you, let's say, you are creating and generating your generative AI company, you're creating arts or something, maybe it's not as necessary to protect, let's say, every piece of data as much as individual healthcare data. But generally, I would strongly recommend to keep a close eye on the developments and see that you can get the latest software. If that's not your focus, which it shouldn't be, if that's not your main business, see that you get the latest state of the art.
What do you think about cloud computing versus not or hosting your machines yourself, like in Kalix? What would you recommend?
If the cloud provider is, you have plenty of options, meaning it's not only American or Asian cloud providers, then I would go with a cloud provider. But as you know, the options are somewhat limited. I wish we had a very strong cloud provider in Europe. I've heard of Gaia X.
I think we should talk about this a little bit. It's a good topic.
Yeah, but it's so easy to get stuck in this because it's such an interesting topic. I think, I add it to the list and let's get back to that. And, the lack of European cloud providers, I think, is staggering.
No, but I think we have several topics to explore with Christian today, which is sort of the European angle. We have talked a lot here about what we define as the AI divide between the tech giants and the rest of the world. And are we concerned? How should we be concerned? How should we work on it? And I think in this context, this is a really good topic to explore further down in these 2 hours.
I'm sure we'll get into AI divide very soon as well. But before we go there, perhaps we can just continue your journey as well. And you, as 16-year-old, you build some intelligent databases, etc., and you get into studies somehow. How did that work? Or what was your initial starting point to your studies? Yeah,
I mean, I did an education as an information technical expert, it was called, and during that time, I really got a professional education. Although I always challenged my teachers, I remember so many cases where I was sitting there and programmed things with computers that had nothing to do with the assignment, but the screen flickered and everything. And I remember just so many times the teacher being behind me and saying, he saw something is happening. He had no clue what it is. But then he was saying, the others, my co-students said, oh, this looks really cool. I mean, what is this, But it's, by the way, also a bit of a symptom of our system here. He was like brushing it off a little bit. He was saying, it's not, who will use that, No, I'm not pointing to me, but they could be an encouragement. I saying, this is something different. Let's see if you can make something of it, which I suspect happens a bit more in the Valley. But this is one education. And then I got very interested with the start of my studies. There were 3 topics that really interested me. In the very beginning, the first 1-2 years, I actually studied many different things. I studied languages, I studied design, media design, and graphics. I studied psychology, and I studied computer science. So that was sort of the starting point. I started like this, let's say, right?
To feel it out. Feel
it out and don't regret it. And then I actually ended up doing 2 ways forward. One was psychology. So I have a degree in psychology. And I did then computer science / AI, because all my courses were then essentially in AI. And
And this was this in Australia, or was this?
No, it was actually in Paderborn in Germany.
In Germany,
that was the very first initial studies, and then also in Stockholm. I was actually here at the KTH and Stockholm University,
right.
And I remember I was pendeling back and forth, like doing cognitive psychology and biological psychology over at SU at Stockholm Uni, and then taking the Tunnelbana back to KTH, and did neural networks, and it was surprisingly close together. So every time, I did, let's say, cognitive psychology or these topics, I read the books, I went back, and it was translated in many of the AI approaches. So for me, it was very complementary. I guess both areas went a bit further, like when you had, psychotherapy or these topics, you start exploring Jung and Freud and so on, so along the lines of what we discussed earlier. And in computer science, I also did advanced algorithm, quantum computing, those areas. So I complemented with that area too.
Yes, so favorite topic of mine as well. I add that to the list.
So you started your studies in Europe, and then did you finish them in Europe, or was the connection then? And then later on, you went to Australia.
Yeah, exactly. I was then in Australia. If we can sort of wrap this part up, I can just maybe mention one little story about one professor that also influenced me a lot. He was a psychology professor. He knew many of the Schank and so on in the 70s who did expert system case-based reasoning. One of the big guys back in the day, psychology. Many psychologists became AI experts, actually. And he was a typical Swiss professor. Confused. He always scratched his head, was pointing, pointing to different directions. He knew Piaget, worked with him back in the days. And he really quite inspired me. Like, he gave me a lot of advice, where to go, what to do, supported me a lot. And that was really very good. And he was, in fact, one of those that studied back in the 70s and 80s these word embeddings. He was the guy who said to me, I clearly remember it. He was saying that if you were to take all texts in the world and combine them in this word embedding type method, right, the networks of words, you will be able to construct meaningful answers to questions and meaningful text, which more or less is along the lines of GPT-3 and so on, right?
And what year was this approximately?
Yeah, that was when he did these studies, that was 78, 79. When I talked to him, it was mid 90s and 90s. But by then he's more of a psychologist and not a computer scientist. He just knew his intuition was, and he was doing research in this direction. And then I went to Australia.
So was that sort of the next level of your studies? Or was there an exchange, or how did that work? What was the way to get to Australia?
Well, by then I didn't have any degree yet. And then I went to Australia and was at Melbourne University and the RMIT. You probably know them because you live there, right? So Melbourne Uni, Royal Melbourne Institute of Technology was the other one. I did RoboCup.
What year?
99 and 2000 and 2001.
Oh, I was at RoboCup 2001 as well.
Yeah, here we go.
Nice.
Exactly. No, good, fantastic fun. And I actually my master thesis here too, which we can talk about. I got the SAIS award for that thesis too.
Which one was that?
It was called Software Architecture for Four-Legged Robots.
Which were for the RoboCup project.
Yes, the AIAW robots.
Of course.
So you were in the physical class?
The physical class, and later on also in the simulation class. Yeah.
So who was our other guest who is so passionate about RoboCup?
Sahar, right?
Sahar. Yeah, she's a king. Yeah. She's super really passionate.
Yeah. No, but I think the AIAW robots is so fun. I mean, I don't think people understand all the different leagues that you have in RoboCup, etc. But I think it's fun to for one start with, what is the goal of RoboCup in some way, to actually in 2050
win,
to be able to take the champions of robots.
Is anyone watching? How much time do we have? 28 years. We have come a long way, though. I mean, when you look back, look at the humanoid biped robots, right? Back 10 years ago, they could barely stand, but now they're running around, right? I mean, Boston Dynamics.
Yeah. And so, what do you think about Boston Dynamics and their approach, by the way?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get to know Mark Rybert, the CEO and founder, quite well. We were both invited to Dubai to a big event. Right. We're on a panel. We had a lot of very interesting discussions, and I think they do. He's a very humble guy. Yeah. As we all know, I think most of us have seen the beautiful videos.
Cool.
Right? It's super cool videos.
Which one is your favorite? The dancing videos or the dog videos?
They were all
super cool.
Very nice. Yes. I don't know if I have a favorite. All the last 4 were good, right? So, and quite impressive. Then, of course, you can argue that, okay, well, how much machine learning is, and that maybe that's the point you want to make, right? There's much more, a different
programming.
Exactly. Yeah. But nevertheless, right? You don't need to have, if you can solve it without AI and machine learning, do it.
Of course.
Right?
But is it scalable though? Is that the way to actually make it work in any kind of environment?
Well, I know that at the time when I talked to him now, 2.5 years ago, they were heavily employing AI machine learning experts, right? Yeah. So they are certainly looking at it. And they had some level of machine learning in it. So they're certainly pushing that area. So they're very aware and, so I like them. I think, as you know, AI is actually a wide field. Many people mistake it these days only, data, machine learning, deep learning. That's what it is. And arguably that's what drives the ecosystem. But of course you have robotics, they have linguistics, computational linguistics, natural language processing, many other areas too. And robotics, the physical embodiment of intelligence is a topic which we can easily fill another day with, right?
Yes.
So, can you
I think some people, still think of AI as the Matrix or the Terminator. And I think that's a really dangerous view of how AI is. And there are so many other ways to do AI than having to have the motorics of a robot being fulfilled. And we haven't really come that far at all when it comes to have a functioning motorics of robots. And I think that's an important understanding that a lot of people missed these days, right? Even though Boston Dynamics have gotten really far with all the control theory approaches for doing so. So still, it's a bit of a disconnect, I think, with the people's view of AI and what robotics really is.
Yeah. And there's also a question as to how much we expect everyone to understand all aspects, right? I have later on, we would talk about it later perhaps, but I moved a bit into medicine and healthcare because I find it so fascinating, what we can do in this space. But also medicine is by and large for the average person and all of us here, is also a very complex environment where, you need experts that have studied it for 10 years, but no one would expect that, all the anatomy, medical terms and so on, right? So AI is a bit in that space.
I think this is a good discussion to have, who to be an expert, how to coexist with these sort of super expert environments. Because if we, as you did now, learn from how we actually have viewed medicine for hundreds of years, it will tell us something how we should apply AI and how we should act around this. Because now I think this is some of the hurdles, right? That should everybody be an expert? Everybody needs to be data literate. Well, yes, But what does it mean to be data literate as a CEO is, of course, not the same as the data scientist. But there's a lot of misconception here. And if Sweden says we're going to be the best at using and applying AI, it becomes even more interesting to be clear on this.
Yeah, I agree.
Cool. I added that as a topic, so let's see if we can get back to that shortly.
But we are. I mean, like I have a Australian fabulous. So you got to Australia.
Yeah.
How did you get there? Because that's always
with a plane. With a plane.
Yeah. But how, why and how? How did you wrangle that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. I was actually having the choice going to California. I had offers there from universities to study, the ones that we know, or Australia. And I think one reason was that the RoboCup would take place in Melbourne. It was in Stockholm 99, and then it was in Melbourne 2000. So I thought, maybe that is taking me somewhere. Yeah. And I met the people from Melbourne Uni, RMIT were very involved in it naturally. And they said, come over, we take you in. And I was then enrolled as an honors student at Melbourne Uni and met a lot of fantastic people, Ellen Blair and so on. And I just, during the RoboCup event that we had in Stockholm, I just had a really good experience because for days we were sleepless nights where we were hacking, right? Like the whole night and trying to get these robots doing the things we wanted it to do. And we were essentially sleeping in the same place with the students from Carnegie Mellon and from UNSW around the world, right? From Kyoto, I think it was. So you were all these different universities, all staying there, trying to. So much fun, extremely engaging, very deep, right? You have an enormous emergence and also a great exchange, right? Because it wasn't like, we have to really win, get the elbows out. It was more like super curious how we make these robots work with each other, because it wasn't just one robot, right? It was like 3 in this case, or in other cases, maybe 5 or more. But how do you make them work as a team?
Exactly.
Which later on, by the way, became one of my main interests also. Oh. So how do you make groups of AIs, work together? And that's probably one of the reasons why it then took me back to Australia. And to maybe if we can go deeper, but to wrap it up, I ended up getting a degree in psychology. I got a Master's of Science in German, diploma in Germany, and then also a Civ Inc. Master's here from KDH. And then also a degree also degree in Australia. Yeah. And then also I continued with my PhD there after having done a little detour working for a startup.
And the startup, was that in Australia?
Melbourne.
So basically when you were down there, then you kind of stayed on in Melbourne.
Stayed on, was working for Agent Arts, which was a company that was more or less going in the direction of Spotify today. Ultimately we sold it to Microsoft. At the time we had one office in San Francisco and one in Melbourne. Relatively small company. I think we started with 10 people or so. And I was leading the AI part, all the recommendation engines. I was using neural networks back then. I was using essentially everything that machine learning had to offer at the time, like data mining, which was
that made sense for the use cases.
And I also remember I gave the company a little intro training, about neural networks and how they work. And I prepared like 4-hour training sessions, and the CEO and the COO, which all came from McKinsey. You could see at some point their eyes were just glaring over. After 1 hour, they said, "Okay, well, we get it," But yeah, it was giving. And then also, I remember this is an interesting scenario which we sort of facing today. Back, 20 years back when I did that, but the recommendation algorithms were using demographic data. I had, tens of thousands of songs, and I analyzed them all, doing an analysis, spectrum analysis and so on, right? And captured hundreds of features out of it, and then essentially spit out the top 10 sort of recommendations. And they were compared with an industry expert, if you want to call it that. That was our director of music. And we had discussions, how do we compare the outcomes? Is it really close together? And we had big arguments because he would, of course, listen to it. He would know that one music comes from Michael Jackson, the other one from another person, let's say. And he just often didn't agree with the similarities. But how objective is that, you know? It's hard to tell. But we had a lot of discussions about what the AI would spit out and what the music scene, let's say, would find acceptable.
So this was more of a content-based recommender system at that time, I guess?
We had this... yes, content-based in the sense it would recommend music, right? So, yeah.
But not collaborative filtering based. I mean,
that too. We had 3 or 4 approaches. We used demographics, we used music analysis, and we did collaborative filtering.
Okay.
Probably there were more, but it's forgive me, you know, it's been a while back. Yeah. As another little side note, Kate Crawford, do you know her?
I recognize the name, but
no. She's maybe if she ever watches, but she's now in New York. And she did a PhD and professorship then now in also at UNSW, and now she's in the US. She has become quite known for the AI Now Institute in the US, very heavily involved in AI. But back in the days, she was a DJ. So I got to know her back and we had discussions and I knew she was interested, but she was in a different world. I mean, she was like DJing, making music with Biftech. The music company was called Biftech, I think. And, like very progressive, trance, techno, electronic music. And then she moved from there into the AI space. So I don't know if I had an influence. Yeah, that's her. Yeah. If you go back, she was back in the day, she was doing completely different things. Very fascinating. So we had lots of discussions, right? And philosophical discussions too, what's possible and what shouldn't be done and so on.
And what was the name of the startup, by the way?
Agent Arts. That's, yeah. Okay. Probably maybe they're still there.
Yeah.
But then you basically... You did that detour and then you went for a PhD, right?
Exactly.
At the same university?
At Monash then.
At Monash.
So I thought I'd try something else.
Exactly.
So Melbourne offered me and also Canberra. Both of these universities, which are sort of the biggest and best known there in this field, both of them offered. But I thought I'd go to Monash. Partly because the supervisors that were there, to be honest, I met them on an event, on a private party. We got along, and they happened to be very good people. One, Michael Georgiev, who was leading the Australian AI Institute in Australia, and also Ingrid Zuckerman, whose my academic grandfather is Julia Pearl, so very influenced by causality, all the discussions around causality. So that brought me forward into this field. And then Monash it is. And it's worth saying, right, just like in countries that are a bit smaller in terms of population, everyone knows each other. So I was still at our RMIT and Melbourne Uni and so on. Met among others, which will be one of the persons I will recommend for you to invite. Can I preempt or shall I keep it?
Please preempt.
Yeah. So Iyad Rahwan is one of those
How do you spell it?
Iyad, Rahwan. Maybe you know Moral Machines. He did a lot of these studies with moral machines, and we both did our PhD together essentially.
Nice.
We both, for example, also had John McCarthy over. He was really obviously
he must be a bit elderly at that time.
He was much elderly, but he was over at Melbourne Uni, and we were very, very very honored to have him there and meet him, you know, and have a discussion with him. But Iyad is good. He's now actually moved from the MIT to Berlin, so he's now at the Max Planck. Maybe he is. So we know each other well. You should definitely have a look at him. He's a good guy. He's very good. He has. If I do a bit of cross, Iyad, you have to invite me for beer if I say this. But he has some cartoon.
We can do two. We have you come as a dynamic duo. We have done it a couple of times. Good. That an old guest recommends a new guest, and then they come together and we drink beer together. That's perfect.
Yeah, good. Exactly. He's, by the way, he is doing what I wanted to say to give him a bit of support. Evil AI cartoons, he calls it. So he's evil AI cartoons. So he's doing sketches and comics now too on the side. That's worth looking up, I think, for a bit of fun.
A bit of
sarcastic,
sarcastic on the AI.
Yeah, exactly. Like an
AI
overlooking an AI, and those types of things. So, it's
cool.
good.
And people that may not know about.
Yeah.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, these types of things. It's good fun. He's in the start. Might lift off, might not.
That's super fun.
Yeah. And John McCarthy, for people that know it, he actually coined the term AI right back in 1956 or something. So
exactly.
it's a pioneer for sure in the AI business.
Yeah.
But back to your PhD, how what was the main focus that you had in your PhD?
Yeah, I was actually doing it together with Hewlett Packard back in the days also.
Really?
So I was over in their labs, HP labs in the Valley several times. Bernhard Burg was our guy back then, leading this area. And look, in the beginning of a PhD, maybe for most, you go, you explore, right? And I was very, very interested in computational linguistics, and this area, natural language processing. But then I ended up going down the line of multi-agent systems, distributed AI. Because I started realizing, and that may have come partly from my psychology study, I was very interested in social psychology and cognitive psychology. These group processes, right? When we are sitting together here now, what makes us act in a way that we do right now, right? The purpose of us being intelligent is probably fundamentally because we are interacting, we're social, right? We want to talk, we want to solve problems together, we want to get to know each other. There's a whole bunch of these things. And that brought me then into this area of multi-agent systems. How do you solve tasks together? How do you get to know each other? And I moved a bit into this area where Milind Tambe, perhaps you know him. So he's now at Harvard. So he went from USC to Harvard, and looking at teams that work together. So he worked on things where you would have helicopter missions. This is just a very practical example, but something called flexible teamwork. He published that in 96, probably one of the papers that brought me into this field. And also Harvard professor Barbara Gross, she did these shared plans, which meant essentially, well, how do you work with each other? How do you solve problems under conditions of, for example, uncertainty, under conditions of limited communication? So when you have a helicopter mission, military helicopter mission now for sake of explanation, and you have 3 that go out, and you have a mission and you know the plan beforehand, if one is shot down and you don't see that, for example, should you continue the mission or not? Or if you do see it, should you continue the mission? What's your understanding of the common goal? And what's your understanding of the shared plan? And what is your understanding of performing it if things are disrupted, let's say, right? So that's super fascinating.
And also back to Robocop, I guess, as well, right?
Yes, exactly.
To in a corporate way, actually win soccer in some way.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And what was the title of your PhD, by the way?
It was called Collective Iterative Allocation. It's essentially group decision making. And it was actually a lot about how you have individuals and how the subtitle more comprehensively would be several heads think better than one.
Oh.
The purpose being, okay, how would we 3, for example, solve a problem of assigning someone to a particular task, right? I don't know, cleaning the dishes, making a pizza. And all of us would have their individual view on who might be the best of us 3 or us 4 of making a pizza, let's say. And then we would each of us learn every time someone would try to make a pizza and update our knowledge about the world, right? And then ultimately make better decisions every time we're performing tasks and observing the world. And I did essentially a theoretical part, lots of theorems, lots of mathematics and logics and proofs and so on. And then a practical part, an empirical part. And one of the theorems is that, my thesis guarantees that you can find the optimal solution, the optimal assignment, if everyone in the team is rational and optimistic.
Mm-hmm. And that's a big assumption, right?
These are, not necessarily.
The key criteria, rational
yes.
and optimistic for good spirit teamwork.
For finding even the optimal solution. And, but interesting enough, if you turn it around, if you start saying if everyone is pessimistic, so underestimates, let's say, the real performance, then we cannot say anything about outcomes of group decision making. So my supervisor, he laughed and said, there must be a good reason why we are optimistic, in these sort of group setups and so on.
Interesting.
That was,
I see the connection to psychology here as well.
Quite influenced by it, But it has practical applications, as you say, in rescue scenarios. RoboCup was, by the way, also for the listeners and viewers, not just about playing soccer, right? It was very much about, how do you have multiple robots going out on rescue missions? Like now in, was it Tahu? The big volcano outbreak there in front of New Zealand now that just happened. So what if you have many drones and they all have to work together autonomously? So you just press a button and say, get as many people out as possible, right? They all need to work with each other. And my algorithm, my approach would then help to make more optimal decisions and make the whole thing go faster. So it has a lot of it's a very practical application. That's what I hoped.
Was it any machine learning part of it, or was it more like mathematical approach for it? Or?
It had two parts. The machine learning part wasn't that heavy. So, we didn't apply too many neural networks and so on, but it was more really like, how do you have multiple agents learn together? Yeah. So it was machine learning in a sense, how do you make multiple individual autonomous AIs learn? So that's a different take on machine learning, because most of us think of machine learning as, one system, one piece of data, and then let it crunch it. My approach was, what if you have several totally distributed, decentralized AIs and make this? So it's a different type of learning, if you like.
Cool. Awesome. If you were to redo your PhD thesis, today, what would be the main differences you think?
One of my supervisors used to say, once you get the PhD, what's expected from you now is that you're essentially able to do a PhD every 3 months. So, because you need to publish and everything, right? Yeah. So what would I do today? I think I would go deeper. Many of the research that is done has become too application focused and too moves away, becomes very applicable, which I think from my position as a business person and an entrepreneur is, of course, great. But from a point of view to bring us forward on building AI and intelligent machines takes us away from that focus. Right. So thinking deeper about concepts, when we think about making AIs aware and conscious and so on, we have a lot of work to do there. Should we want to achieve that, for example? So,
Cool. And I'm very tempted to go to a small sidetrack here.
Please do.
Okay. Research, academic research, for example, has certain progress or lack of progress that's happened in recent years. And you can see, of course, the big tech giants is basically doing a brain drain from universities, and they are, employing them. And then we have some awesome research institutes for every, tech company that there is, but still, I would argue, and it would be fun to see if you agree, that the publication that happens in peer-reviewed conferences and journals these days is lacking more and more, or is diminishing in value more and more is being published in preprints like arXiv, etc., which can be questioned if that's good or bad. Do you have any thoughts about this? What do you think about academic research and the way the trend has been in the last 5 years or something?
Yeah. So, the purpose of of peer review, that's one part that you're talking about, and arXiv and so on, right? Yeah. So I believe in the scientific method. That's one of the best tools that we have next to mathematics and language and so on. So we should certainly cherish it. And peer reviewing is one of those components that allows some level of certainty. Let's say one gate of checking that we are on the right path. Is it the most effective way? I think we have reached a limit. With some of these things. I think also you might know this particular peer reviewing part. There's now lots and lots of AI systems that check before you submit a paper whether there's plagiarism already in place, right? So it sort of starts filtering out things. So it's not just a clean peer review as we know it 30 years ago or something, right? It's already a bit smarter. Usually when you do have a proper peer review with good people, and I have been reviewing hundreds of papers, it really adds value. It adds value. I personally, when I give reviews also, I give a lot of feedback. In the beginning, far too much. I could have written the paper. But, giving feedback and say, look, I don't understand this part. Can you explain that? Is there something missing? Kicking the tires. Is the rationale correct? And so on. So I think good, proper peer review is certainly good. With the overwhelming amount of papers submitted to,
it's like a exponential increase, though, in number of AI papers being published. I'm not sure if you heard about Yannick Kilcher, but he's this big podcaster, that he's very critical about the peer reviewing process. And he looked into how the NeurIPS and iClear and others are doing reviews these days, and he could see that it's very subjective, and it's more or less a cost of time, who get actually accepted or not.
I mean, as you know, right? It should be double blind and so on. You should have no idea who is submitting it and so on. Often you can pick it if you have a small community. Maybe now with NeurIPS and so on, there's just so many submissions, tens of thousands. And
you can tell, I've done a lot of reviewing myself, but you can very quickly tell if it's a certain tech giant or not behind the paper.
Right. Yeah.
It's so easy to see by the references and whatnot. Right?
Fair enough. No, I think there's a limit now with that approach, particularly in these extremely popular papers, because these conferences don't have enough resources, enough people that can review, right? But ultimately also, the truth will come out. So should you publish something where you make up the numbers or the algorithm is really not good ultimately, but you oversell it scientifically, people will use it and they will realize it's not performing. It's just not doing its job. It's the same, by the way, in medicine, right? It's the same there. If you have, I remember I talked to the people that did research on omega-3 oils, which had a massive boost in the 80s, 90s. That particular researcher was honest enough to say that, well, when we do the studies today, it's almost no difference to people that take omega-3 or not in terms of their, physiology and so on. And one of the reasons he said is probably that more people eat healthier today, right? But this is coming out, even though he published fantastic papers, also medicine. You will ultimately see, whether it works the way it was intended.
We need some way to do it. The question is, I guess, if it should be the kind of closed reviewing system that we had in the past, or it should move towards a more open and perhaps a more continuous type of reviewing, so people can publish false research in some way. It's also a rabbit hole that we can go very deep into. Cool. Okay, so you had your PhD. What happened after that?
What happened after? During all these studies, by the way, I always had my fingers and I worked for companies, right? I mentioned H&Rs before, was One Stone Technology in Germany too, which was actually a smart business process management system. Hewlett-Packard, I popped over there a couple of times and continued working for them. So I always liked this application part, right? I deeply theoretical, but then also, hey, bring it out. What can you do with it? After I did that, I did a postdoc, and I did that at in AI in medicine. That's where I really got deeper into this whole topic of healthcare medicine. Also at Monash University, there we were looking at intelligent systems that would help adherence, contract management, and so on. Was very much to do with care teams and how you have intelligent assistants helping doctors, patients, and others to coordinate very complex long-term care plans. So if someone has diabetes or cancer or something, usually what tends to happen is that the doctor gives you this big list of things to do and say, hey, you just check your eyes, your feet, you do exercise, boom, boom, boom. You get such a list. Then you get the checkups. And for the average person, it's impossible to execute, right? And in addition, you have this big team around you. So we tackled that problem because now in the world is a massive tendency for chronic conditions to be just exploding, right? Aging and mental diseases and so on. So we focused on that. We were the AI group in the medical faculty, and worked a lot with GPs. So I remember I was many times in the offices of doctors and I was making notes and experienced a lot of very interesting situations there.
I guess you mean medical doctors at that time, right?
Medical doctors, exactly. Yeah, that's a story in itself, right? Who's a real doctor? And
he has some familiarity with medical doctors as well.
Yeah, it's funny. Both my parents are medical doctors turned PhDs. So then they are both fake doctors and medical doctors.
Yeah. It can be a long discussion.
I was joking.
Yeah.
But what's interesting, this is a complete side note, but my father, he was doing his medical studies and he actually broke his medical studies halfway to go down and do a PhD in physiology. So then he was stuck in a lab for a couple of years and he got his PhD and then he went back and, finished his, degree and got his AT, allmäntjänstgöring, and continued down the path. So, and my mom did it completely different. She went into, did her training, had me while she was in the training, by the way, and then, went to become a medical doctor, then to become anesthesiologist, to become quite senior. And then she did a PhD within her line of field. So basically she went from, anesthesiology to, how to PhDs in respiratory techniques. And then she went private and into Maquet to build, next generation respiratory machines, stuff like this. But so my dad, he veered off and then, it's interesting. So that whole thing, medical doctor to PhD. Been down that.
Fake doctors.
No,
you will hear that a number of times
from my perspective, it's different aspects. Yeah. It's doctor as a practitioner versus doctor as a researcher. And I think that's the way I would look at it.
An interesting side note here too with PhDs, Philosophie Doctorae, right? So technically in the Anglo system in the UK, Australia, I got a PhD from the university, whereas here in Germany and also I think in most other countries in Europe, you get the degree from the Department of Faculty. You get it specific. So because it's a doctor of philosophy, actually, I remember family members were confused. They were saying, I thought we do AI, computer science. I said, it's a doctor of philosophy, which it's like, oof, one of those that is like, like Platon, Aristotle, and so on.
No,
it's not quite. Yeah.
It's not the same.
Yeah. No. But I remember there was a certain level of confusion. Where people were a bit disappointed or confused when they looked at it.
Yeah, I think with some of our guests, we were exploring the hierarchy of the different levels of professor, associate professor, lector, it's quite, if you're not into the academia, it's not so easy to follow.
And it's different between every country.
And then they have the Anglo-Saxon way versus the Swedish.
And UK have their own. I guess Australia, I don't know. I'm not familiar with their ways of doing it.
I think Australia is fairly UK oriented.
Yeah, very much. I mean, they have honors. There's a couple of small variations, but the honors and the honors is, for example, something that people also don't understand in the most of other UK, Anglo-American countries, right? So, it's a sort of in-between thing, right? When you do bachelor, you can do bachelor with honors, and then you can often transfer to a master's or something.
So I did my university degree in the University of Wollongong. So I started with the undergraduate studies, and then you become a bachelor. And then this is my friends, right? Who wants to party for another year? Let's do an honors. and then so I had some Swedish friends who were going there. Some of us only did the 3 years undergrad, and someone's pressed on to do masters. And typically they actually went via the honors to masters. And then then you talk about undergraduate, postgrad, and then from here, PhD, I guess.
We have been speaking for too long here. We need to get to Tieto soon.
Let's leave the...
Perhaps you can just have a quick walk, until the time you actually approached and got in contact with Tieto. But just to finish up, what happened? You did your postdoc. What happened after that?
Yeah, exactly. So that was with the British Telecom too.
Yeah.
And that which meant in practice, I went to London and Ipswich, to the UK many times, and worked there with BT Research and BT Innovation. By the way, one of the really great AI labs in Europe back in those days. They were doing a lot of fantastic stuff, which comes up now back again. But then I passed when I went to Europe from Australia, I passed through Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and our main PI said, look, come over. We're opening an innovation center in the Middle East. We're opening a research and innovation center here, right? With Etisalat and Khalifa and so on. And so I popped over. I was invited over. Foreign world for me, right? I never really had that on my radar. But I was impressed, they do the right thing. It was the first initiative in this region to actually build patents and innovation and research and so on to that level that we had envisioned. And that's what I did then for a couple of years. I worked for the British Telecom innovation over there. In Dubai, Abu Dhabi, technically. I lived in Dubai. Made good connection. Was a different world. I felt like it was for me. It went from two-dimensional to three-dimensional because you start seeing people living in ways that I have never seen living before. That was a fantastic experience. Had a lot of exposure because those regions, Qatar, Dubai, and so on, have attracted a lot of high-profile people. From different regions. These one of the reasons was that in Dubai and UAE and Qatar, they realized, okay, well, oil ain't going to flow forever. We better going to be a knowledge economy, right? And so they tried to use their money to get the best people over to Dubai. So I had a beautiful opportunity to speak to lots of great people, also Emory and Harvard and so on that level. And and also Wolfram, Wolfram, for example, they came over. We had discussions and projects together. So it was pretty bit surreal, right? That you were in the middle of the desert and you had these high tech sort of projects.
I have to take another side break or side note here, and there is this kind of infamous robot called, perhaps you can Google this, Goran, Sophia the robot. And it was in Dubai, right, that she got actually a citizenship, right?
Yeah. Well, you look at me as if I'm partly responsible for it, but no. So my hair stands up a little bit with that. But I think so. It was Saudi. No, it was Saudi. So don't blame it on the Emiratis.
Okay.
Saudis, I think.
Yeah, maybe Saudi Arabia then.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, just a short comment. What do you think about Sophia the robot?
Not so convinced. I'm not a big fan of it because it's by and large really a facade of something that is displayed as such. I am not a fan of her, to be honest. It gives the wrong impression. It gives the wrong impression on so many levels. It certainly gets the creativity going and so on, right? But it puts it doesn't convince me so much. I'm not so convinced.
I have some insider info on this, and it's extremely faked. I must tell you.
It is. There's probably someone in the background, right?
Yes, with
ouch. Yeah. So here we go. Yeah. No, not my thing. Not my thing.
It's a deep robot fake, I would.
Yeah.
Anyway, it looks impressed. Cool, but it's not AI.
They're even cooler fake ones than this one. So. Yeah. Who's it got so right? Who's running this? So,
This was the last one that they just promoted on CES.
Yeah, it's an example of, right? It's an example of where media and the public is easily fooled by this, which is going to an argument that I have tried to make and pronounce a bit stronger, that we in Europe have to make sure we have folks that understand this stuff. Right. I don't mean it in great respect for many also of the people that you had here in the podcast. Not all of them have PhDs in AIs, but we need to avoid this type of stuff. Yeah. This is not helping anyone, at least not for entertainment. Fine. If you have that at Comic-Con or something, cool, but not at, not in a serious, more serious
but
environment.
This is, let's stay here now a little bit, because I think this is one of the main problems when everything gets hyped up and it becomes sort of marketing and all that. It completely fuzzes the picture of what is the real actions that I should take as a business owner in order to go down and be relevant in the future age. Because you can go down the AI path now simply by doing the right stuff with your data and doing the basic stuff right with your data, and then doing the right proper optimization algorithms for your use case, and not sort of this hype thing that sort of it muddles the picture.
I mean, it taints the whole research that serious people is doing in AIA, which is really bad. I think.
I mean,
Both research and business.
This is one topic, but for the larger population that if we want to talk about staying relevant, it simply becomes very hard to understand, from this fake to this, why should I listen here and not here? And why should I focus on these tasks and not these tasks? And I think this is paralyzing society to take action in the right ways because it's just too confusing.
Yeah. I mean, it's essentially three things, right? It doesn't build. You need to build trust with the people. You need to have a business with the companies. They need to have business rationale, and for research, it needs to be. You need to focus on the real questions, on the deep, important questions that bring us as a society forward. So these are three topics, and this robot ain't helping. It may help part of society for the entertainment industry, but this is not what they're aiming for. They are providing it as an information. They're
claiming it to be proper AI.
But those three key objectives you highlight is quite, to stay the course with those you can unpack that in a lot of different ways.
I have a comment. So I think that in general perception, robots are usually aligned with AI. And I think that is where the problem is, because if you see a humanoid robot like that, and I can put it here as well on the display. So if you look at it like that, people will say like, wow, this is AI, right? But eventually what they are showing is that they have managed to have like a humanoid type of expressions in the skin and the perpetual, like it's completely different from AI. But in general, if you ask my mother, if you ask my wife and etc., robot is equal to AI. And I was reading an article about this, which basically, if you would do a AI company, and this is like a question. So you do an AI company, right? So what will you be, how your logo will look like?
The logo?
Yeah.
Certainly not Sophia for sure, nor Terminator.
Right, but you have like a machine learning Stockholm, what is called like meetup, right?
Yeah.
What is your logo? Is it Terminator logo?
No,
right?
it's HAL 9000 actually.
All right, okay. So in most of the cases, it will be a brain, right? When you and me, we started...
when we did something, the first topic associating some sort of robot like... I don't know, or brain-like.
Yeah, exactly. So
neural.
That was the article. So most of the AI companies use brain or a robot to explain that they are working with AI. So we are doing the connotation between robots and AI. So every time somebody sees like a vacuum cleaner robot from China, so like, that is AI. That's good. So,
oh yeah, should we go into Chinese robot vacuum cleaners? No, let's not go there.
There is some legitimacy to it, right? There is some legitimate, as we mentioned before, embedded AI, right? Like can intelligence exist without a body? That's one consideration and one huge question which people like Rodney Brooks and so on brought up. But also I did a fair bit of research in the beginning of my PhD. Now we're still there and we need to move on, I know. But Justine Cassel and others that were working very closely with making agents, AIs, robots believable, which is an important part of this whole aspect too. So they work very much with theater and performance, and they understood that if you have an AI, it also needs to relate to people. So there's one interesting book called The Media Equation, where they learned that the way how we relate to characters in a movie, our emotional reactions to those, if someone dies or so, is essentially the same than if someone dies in the real world. And that sort of concept, right, you can take it into these AIs, which should be part of it. Now, I got a bit of a dramatic example there, but the idea that you can trust an AI. Right. So there needs to be something that needs to be part of that interface. And there's a lot of research done, by Justine Cassel and many others.
So I have to follow up on that. How do you build trust for AI? What would be your preferred? And not speak like 10 years ahead, like today.
I can tell you even back then, my psychology thesis was precisely on that. Oh, okay. The title of my psychology thesis is how to build trust in natural language or agents, I think I called it something like this. But it was precisely, I tested a control group and I did the psychology test, right? So I had a control group and a test group. And I was essentially building, one approach was to have the AI explain the actions it took. Yeah. So it would explain more the context as to why it would ask the questions it does. And that's one mechanism that I found in, I think I had, look, it was a smaller psychology, but I think I had 40, 50 test subjects and I divided them. And so those that, and then I measured it without going into details, but essentially the one that is explained its actions in particular circumstances, I used it in real estate. The trust was higher by taking these types of actions. So you can have a whole bunch of human gists. There's another research on small talk, which works better in some societies than in others, as we all know, and the Nordics might not be the best for that. But essentially, small talk in countries like the US and Australia is a very important factor in building trust to your to say to your customers. Or something.
So if we, I think this is such an important topic. I think we should just go a bit deeper here as well. And there are a lot of people that have ideas about how to build trust. One could be that you should have interpretable AI in terms of like introspection, in terms of understanding how the model works in detail, so to speak, and may even be afraid of or not proponing more advanced black box deep learning methods in that way. Or you can have other ways that actually try to do, they have to explain themselves in some way to do predictions. What's your view of, if you think deep learning or AI in general, what is the best way to actually have proper trust in that way? If you want to explain it or understand it somehow.
You mean now for someone that would be using, or how? Yeah,
okay. I'm going to take a medical doctor.
Yeah,
and I can take a project that we worked with. Was to try to predict, should you prescribe antibiotics or not? Mm-hmm. This was for dental care in Sweden. Mm-hmm. And then you have some model that says, yes or no, you should prescribe antibiotics. But why should a medical doctor or patient trust that decision? And how can you make that person, either the expert, the medical doctor, or the patient, trust that decision? And then you can say that, well, either you go for the interpretable AI kind of approach where you have a model that you can understand exactly why it made the decision, or you can go the other more explainable thing where they have to actually in some way, either attribution-based or some kind of explainable generation way, do that.
So if you want to do it right, I think one question that is very important is how does that individual, what does that individual require in order to build trust? That would be one very important part of that equation. And that may in some cases be explainability. I tend to be a bit more in that category. I drill medical doctors often a fair bit on that, but others might need very different types of mechanisms in order to be to trust the decision of the doctor. So that might be one of the questions you might want to ask yourself. In some cases, people are trusting the whole entity, right? They trust the doctors,
system, they trust
the system, and so on. Exactly. And but if you ask in more general terms, not everyone cares about full explainability of the algorithms and the choices that are made. In fact, few people, this is something that I'm drilling doctors about. I ask them often, I don't know if I should share, then the doctors are like, oh, don't tell people. But it's like, what are the top 3, publications that you're basing your decision on if it's a more serious thing that they do with me, right? What is the top articles that you're making this decision on, right? That's something I do like to understand. And then I read the papers myself and say, I understand where you're coming from, right? So, I think it depends on individuals, what they would find acceptable. Options could be there. Interpretability, as you mentioned, and explainability are good. Some people might, for example, as you also know, this balance between, okay, you want it more explainable or you want it more accurate, right? And there's also all these studies that some people say, well, as long as you give me the outcomes of the best possible decision versus, well, I want to have everything explained. I mean, there's a couple of things, and maybe that could be inbuilt into these types of responses when you want to build trust with people.
But there is an angle here where this becomes, a quite important question and also very challenging. So let's say I set up a public service type AIs. And here now I need to find something that is sort of, it's going to work in a population of a municipality. And here we now have a huge spectrum of education and demographics and all that. So now we need to, we need to figure out how to, is there a one size fits all? Is it something that can be minimum, you could argue from it, what is the minimum level of, how to approach it when it's not individualistic? I mean, like if it's individualistic, I can even have it, do you want the most accurate or do you want to have it explained? And then I can choose, right? But we will have services where sort of someone needs to figure out how to work with the whole population of your municipality for a service. Then it becomes interesting how to go about that.
But I still think it's a wrong way to view it, to say that you either have explainable or high accuracy. I think you can do both, actually. And I think the whole approach of saying that you have to resort to simple models to just have explainability is wrong in itself.
True. Yeah.
There are these kind of amazing models called, one is WT5. This T5 is an NLP model, you probably know about it, that can generate text in a really nice way. And they have one called YT5. So then it doesn't just, generate the prediction, prescribe antibiotics or not, but it also explains why, given the context it has. So it actually provides like a natural language explanation for doing that without having to introspect this kind of huge, this is a huge model. It's no way to understand the interior of the neurons in this model. Instead, you explain it by letting it explain itself. And I think that's much more accurate because, if you were to make a decision saying, I think, Anders, you should get the third shot right now, which probably is true, then, I don't argue that or trust you more by looking into your brain, how that works, right? You have to instead explain it, right? Give some arguments for it, right?
So I know your position on this, Anders. So you're basically saying that sometimes we're asking the AI, literally, can I look inside your brain? When it basically would be more logical how we humans interact. Please explain yourself why you made this decision. It's very simple, but
and as you pointed out, by and large, we are not the requirements we're putting on an AI to explain itself in the public sector or healthcare or something tends to be so much higher now, right? It's like it's fully explained, giving all the reasons which are like totally fail safe, right? So it's a very high requirement and very hard to achieve. I feel,
but I think, to some degree, this has to do with AI literacy. That essentially they are asking to, I want to understand your decision here. Can I cut your brain up? We are not asking to look inside your brain. I'm asking you to explain yourself or having your, what are you basing this on?
Like the top 3 publications, as you mentioned.
Because if you think about that, then you can build systems that can highlight where is the neuron in the neural network that made the biggest impact on this, but we are, so here there is some sort of gap on understanding how this,
what's reasonable and what can be,
you're asking for something which is not really how it's meant to be done. I mean, like, I don't know. I think that this is a lot of education also about,
I understand. And you probably also read the AI Act now and so on, right?
Yes. We have to go there as well.
Let's go there.
Please. There's so much more. How did we get there? If we end, so I can pick up the trail. I can pick it up because I remember it was so I was in Dubai and, if I may just jump back there and, we were looking also at healthcare and pandemics, by the way, back in the days. And we looked a lot at intelligent systems. So how do you predict, how to distribute vaccines and so on in the Middle East and Dubai, because obviously Emirates, Dubai, Qatar are like hotspots now, right? Whenever you travel to Australia, usually you land in Dubai or Abu Dhabi or Qatar.
Been
right?
there, done that.
Exactly. So it was very much in their interest to understand things like pandemics, and that's work we did a long time back. We used micro simulations, by the way. So agent-based systems together with micro simulations where we could simulate an entire country or entire region individually. Every single citizen would be simulated, and you would simulate things like, travel, etc., etc. And then we would be building an AI system that would react to it. So it would be based on let's say the Emiratis' behaviors. What would you dispatch? What would you do? What's the plan in order to deal with disasters? That was Dubai. Great experience. Worked very closely with the healthcare authorities there. Some great contacts I took from there, international. Many of them moved to all sorts of other places, from Hong Kong, Tokyo, US. And then I went back. I got a great offer from IBM. And I went to Australia and worked for in Melbourne, the IBM Research and Innovation Labs and business. And that's when I also became a professor at UNSW during that time. And I was essentially responsible for a team that was a mix between AI experts, AI scientists, PhDs, and then also the other part was optimization experts, optimization with mathematical modeling and so on, which we made a big point of, right? We're very proud with right? Optimization is sort of a different problem, if you like, right? With heuristics, and you're probably familiar with it. But yeah, that was my time at IBM. I think I was there for 2.5 years, worked a lot with the international labs. So one good part of IBM is that I was in Tokyo, Beijing. We just opened a lab in Africa, was over in New York and, in the US several times. And so we had access. My mentor back then was, the guy, now I should remember his name. Sorry. It's the guy who did the Kasparov, the Deep Blue computer.
Ah, super cool.
Yeah, maybe if you can look it up, Deep Blue Kasparov IBM. He was my mentor at IBM. So
that would be
nice.
super exciting.
Yeah.
So how closely related to the time when he was working on Deep Blue were is it during the time?
No, it was years later.
What year is the Deep
97,
Blue?
I think.
97 is Deep Blue.
What became then good is Jeopardy. So he was in this Jeopardy. Remember the Jeopardy? He was a bit more on the side involved. Let's see if Murray Campbell. Yeah, he is. Yeah, Murray on the left. Yeah, that's him. He's the guy who ran the whole show. So when you see the Kasparov pictures and the person that is doing the movement for Deep Blue, that's Murray.
Oh, nice.
So hello, Murray, if you're there. So yeah, New York and so on. That was my IBM time. Met some great people. What can I say about that? And then I got a really fantastic offer. Any questions about my?
No, we need to move fast.
I think we need to go
quickly to
we have
Tieto
so
as
many
well.
cool topics. We have spent. This is so fascinating.
This was the fastest, the fastest of all of them. 1.5 hours.
But we have talked about a lot of stuff in between, of course.
But I can say, so I moved. I want to come to Europe for several reasons, professionally and privately, and then I had several offers, from Germany, Finland, France, and I ended up coming to Stockholm because I was here before. A couple of friends here. I was working with EVBAR, which is a smaller company, but what was really fascinating is that it was the SWIOS project and SWIPS project, and it was unique in that SCB, our Statistical Center Bureau, was in charge of combining many different data sources and gave it to us to analyze it, to essentially start investigating the impact of treatments on patients. So which is practically not being investigated because we have all point contacts to the healthcare system. You go there, you have an illness and you go back for the same illness. There's no continuity, right? And we had essentially this very unique project, which attracted me to having, I think we had dozens of data sources, like birth and death registry and the journal that we enter our data in and quality registries and you name it, right? The whole spectrum. And then we were able to calculate essentially the health outcomes and the value that every treatment would generate, So, that was a very interesting project. SWIOS, it was called. And, that was my time there.
Awesome.
And then I
went to push you a bit more. Move quickly ahead here.
Yeah. And then I actually ended up starting my own company. called Healthy Habits. Although I was working for several startups before in different functions and was leading AI, it was time to do my own thing there, right? So I went in and was really, I was working with a Dutch co-founder and CTO, and we were building a system which was intelligent and brought people that have health ambitions and chronic conditions together in a complex network. So it's a big, do you know Patients Like Me, perhaps? It's a platform where patients that have conditions are exchanging things with each other, right? An old style forum. And we took this whole concept a level forward and made people connect with each other where the chances of them achieving good health outcomes are the highest. And we used all sorts of AI algorithms. Collaborative filtering was maybe also one of those, but we collected data. We're with Sting. Stockholm Innovation. What are they called? You know Sting?
I know Sting, but yes. Stockholm Innovation.
Sting.
I forget what the acronym stands for.
You look it up. Yeah, but it's essentially one of the Y Combinator of the Nordics here. If you want to compare it, it's not obviously quite the same, but what does it stand for? We're hiding it a little bit. Let's see if you can look it up. But anyway, so we were with Sting. They pick, a couple of startups every year to support. And we were one of the hottest digital therapeutics startups here in the Nordics, Nice. We were about 33 people. Stockholm Innovation and Growth AB, exactly. So they have a couple of, if you look at the companies that are successful, a couple of them are really now unicorn level. So quite good, quite nice, deep tech and so on. So we were with them, built this platform, worked quite closely with the Karolinska and other healthcare providers here. I popped over to the Valley many times to see what type of investment we could get. If I may say so, I was a bit disappointed about the Nordic investment scene when it comes to the culture of terms of what can you get in terms of investment and money and support and knowledge. It is, in my opinion, still so that if you go over to the Valley, you get both. You get people that know this stuff because they have done it for the last 40, 50 years, ever since HP and Microsoft. And you have these generations now where the money is back. All the guys that invested in Google and these guys and 90s, they are now billionaires. They invested maybe a couple of million back then. Now they're billionaires and they don't know where to put the money, to put it a bit extreme, right? And they know what digital stuff can do without needing to understand every single bit of it right in the beginning, right? So that's sort of the setup.
So bottom line, you can see a difference in how it works and how basically how to approach and.
Totally. Yeah. And I have these discussions here too. I'm a little bit, I don't know if you want to use the word critical, but I try to encourage our ecosystem here, to think differently. I mean,
what is the main difference is that if you, they have a different experience. So clearly they are more mature, but how does it play out in terms of gaps or things to work on or differences?
Yeah. I mean, there are two things. It is the learning simply, like, what does that mean? What does digital and data mean? How tangible is it? If you take a forestry company or any other company, it's very tangible. There's a forest, there's going to be wood, and then there's going to be, papers coming out of it. I mean, that logic, very, very tangible. Those people that invested in these companies, there is no, but we don't know if the data is possibly not correct, or we need, it's a very fluffy stuff. So the experience, and as you say, the experience and the knowledge is limited. And then the other thing is also the amount of money that's available for these types of more crazy projects, if you want to call it that, right? It's not as available.
So what you're saying is that in Stockholm we have a harder time with the funding for the crazy, really new first capital.
The whole of Europe.
So the whole of Europe, more or less.
What if you compare Sweden to Germany then? I mean, you're from Germany as well. What do you think about the startup scene, in Stockholm or Sweden compared to Germany?
Yeah, look, I think it's by and large, I have been in a couple also, Portugal, France, Germany, Netherlands. I know some of them to some good level. I would say that there's definitely good stuff. There are good exceptions also, of good entrepreneurs, and they're pushing it forward.
We have a lot of really good unicorns in Sweden, right?
Yes, we do. And it's often named, right? The Kings and the Klarnas and the Spotifys, right? They are usually the three Musketeers.
Minecraft and what.
Minecraft is true, but aren't they Finnish? I thought they were Finnish.
And they were acquired, but yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is correct. That is correct. Many of them, though, are not exactly in the digital space, and many of them do not have their AI or these sort of deeper technologies and teams here in Europe, like Spotify, for example, has their team over in New York and stuff, right?
Nowadays, not in the back in the day.
True
Swedish company to start with, but nowadays perhaps not as much. Klarna is another one. It's also you can say various things about Klarna, but it's a very successful company in the end.
Yeah. But I think the point is also when you look at who is now really these mega companies, right? I mean, I think I said recently, that 99% of the AI services that we are consuming now in Europe, they're not made in Europe, right?
Sure.
I mean,
it's the tech giants.
Exactly. It's the Apples and the Samsungs. It's the microprocessors in the background. It's Amazon and Google and all this is not in Europe. Yeah. That's what I think that's what I'm referring to. Yeah. And no doubt there are individual companies, Celonis in Germany and so on, that make a good way forward.
Zalando and whatnot.
Zalando, there is great exceptions, but none of them, I feel, have the potential to really make it to the really big next level, global boom company.
We don't have a single cloud provider, as you said.
Exactly. No single cloud provider. No one that sets nothing that compares to the Google search type levels. We could be, that's I think one of the questions you may ask me, what's going to happen for me next? But, we could be good and strong in some spaces, but at the moment we are not good. And it has to do with I think it has partly to do with the entrepreneurial culture. When I popped over to the Valley, I was asking many of these investors, many angel investors who were, by the way, willing to invest in my company, a much more substantial amount than many European, Swedish investors were willing to invest. What's the difference? And I think they said it's sort of this combination of potentially, right? That's a theory of the gold that came in there in these days. There was a lot of gold, there was a lot of money, and then there was education. There was essentially these people that had this entrepreneurial high risk attitude. And then you had the Berkeleys and the Stanfords that were having these great people that, knew what they were doing from a tech side. So this combination was possibly one of the starting points of this whole thing too.
So because that's interesting, because with Stanford and Berkeley and all them, and they have always, as I understand, have a much part of the whole educational system almost has been to spin off your ideas into startups. I mean, like there's such a line of startups coming out of Stanford and Berkeley. Of course, we have done that a little bit in Sweden, but not at all in such a systematic machinery.
Yeah, and it's even in some sense discouraged. Yeah? So we mentioned now in this discussion two things. One is when I was doing these crazy things on a computer and the teacher was behind me, was like, no, go back to what's in the script type thing. Exactly. And also that the fact that the way we got it educated, let's say on a deeper level, was like we had our own hacking and cracking scene, right? It wasn't that the system encouraged us to think in different ways, right? So
it's back to one of our favorite quotes that we have, and Elon Musk quotes, first principle thinkings and actually do stuff differently than they are normally done. Go against the norm.
Really go to the core basics and rethink from.
Yeah, and that's what we don't quite have. I don't want to mention family names. It's the same in Germany, Sweden, Finland. There's many, let's say, very well-known richer families that are owning big companies.
You can say the names.
We don't, when you say it like that, we don't need to say that.
Yeah, but I also partly interact with them, so I want to. I think they are in the process of changing. There's hope as well. Yeah. But the point is that I think the many of them have earned their money over the last 100 years in very, very different ways in digital. And the new rich, let's say, in the entrepreneurs in the Valley have earned their money through a Google and an Amazon. So they're like, where's the next Google? Where's the next Amazon? Yeah. Whereas many of the families and rich investors have a different attitude. Where's the next forest that we can make it a bit more extreme? But that is a bit the mindset that I'm a little bit concerned about.
But what are the key things that will sort of grease the machinery? You know, how can we educate, or what should we do, or how can we work in to get ahead? Because I think it's the whole ecosystem. It's part us as entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
It's part the government, how we fund or how we tax. All this, right?
Yeah.
So, but any top thoughts? What you would say? This is where we should put our efforts in.
Yeah, this is really hard. I have spent a lot of time in the last couple of years of thinking how we can change that. I come back to this idea of how do we create entrepreneurial thinking. It's on the board level. It's on the leadership level. It's on every level. You know, how can you bring more of your own skin into the game, like the gold diggers did back in the days in the valley, right? I don't know anyone, and I'm now speaking here more from books, but from what you understand, they pretty much left everything right and left and went there and digged out and you know, they risked everything, right? Crazy attitudes. And that's sort of probably is
part of the culture now.
Yeah. Who's willing to do that? You know, I mean, if you want to do a 10x, 100x company, you need to be willing to take a risk. This is not going to be just a normal investment. So how do you create a risk? How do you accept a certain level of uncertainty when you have data and digital and algorithms? Because I can imagine when Google started pitching the first time, they were saying, hey, you know, we just make a copy of the internet and have a really complex algorithm that pulls it together. And then maybe in 15 years time, we start making money from it. You know, it's a crazy idea. It's like very, very abstract.
At that point in time, super abstract. And this is the type of stuff that you would hear today with folks talking about quantum computing or, you know, federated learning and so on. I mean, this would be similar pitches. And then you need to be reacting to it and not say, yeah, but can you make money like in 3 or 4 years time? If you ask that question, well, then you're not going to build a Google or something, right?
I think we need to we have so many topics to try to cover, and we have like half an hour or so left, but perhaps you can just quickly jump ahead a bit and say, you know, how did you first get in contact with Tieto?
TietoEVRY now. It is, in fact, we merged with EVRY. It was during, I had Healthy Habits, and I had essentially the pitch by Ari and Kimo, Executive Vice President and the CEO, saying, hey, we want to build many growth businesses here at TietoEVRY. Are you keen? That was sort of the pitch. It was saying, all right, well, you're using Healthy Habits now. We understand you're passionate about it and we know your AI skills, but we want to build something even bigger. We want to build growth businesses along the lines of, you know, substantial stuff. And so that brought me to TietoEVRY. Then I focused, and rather than focusing on the entire business, I focused more on working with 2 colleagues and then building the AI machine learning capabilities of TietoEVRY in this particular part, and then focusing on businesses in finance, in forestry, and so on. So there were several growth businesses that were developed, and both of them, by the way, there were product logics, right? The scalabilities and building a product make it so attractive that many customers would buy it. And that brought me to TietoEVRY, and then I was leading their efforts forward until now, and still ahead, hopefully. Yeah.
Perhaps for people that don't know TietoEVRY, can you just describe, you know, what is their, you know, what do they do? What makes them special in some way? Yeah, special makes them, they are a European company. They are a Nordic company. Yeah. Headquarters technically in Finland. The biggest businesses are in Sweden and in Norway. We are 24,000 people. So very, very sizable organization. One of the biggest, in fact, in Europe in terms of IT providers. We are a bit mixed. We have software business. We have products, finance and healthcare. We are acting as an integrator, and we are consultancy. Yeah. So we have all these different wide aspects. We are a large company.
partner with many in the ecosystem, the small and the large. I don't know if you had, for example, Silo.ai, Peltarium, we both know, of course. There is on a local level, a lot of partnerships. Internationally, Microsoft, we work with Microsoft, with IBM, with Oracle and Pegasystems and so on, right? So there's a whole bunch of collaborations, and that's probably in short. Probably worth noting that we are really a trusted provider. We are very close to our customers. So many of us know us. The company has been around for 50 years, and many of them, they know us as the one to go to when it comes to questions of IT. That's sort of the short story. And now we are actually on a big transformation journey.
Okay.
Because we are known, to be frank, we are more known to be an infrastructure provider. More on this level of, the classical IT. How do you have your IT, part running? But much of the AI machine learning is happening, in other parts of the organization. I mean, it's value creation in the sales department, product organization, how to run the company, how can you build a system that doesn't need McKinsey and BCG, but instead you have so much data about the world that it gives you the strategic direction type thing. And so we are moving heavily into this space. That's how the company is now establishing itself. And I'm one of those that push it forward.
And what is your main role? What do you work with yourself at Tieto mainly?
Well, the overall mandate is to make sure that we as a company are successful in this new era of AI and data. That's a high level ambition. So sometimes I'm saying I'm a bit of a Miro CEO, on a smaller scale, responsible for the business of next year and the year after type thing. That includes how to build the capabilities and competencies. So come to us if you're a fantastic AI scientist, machine learning expert, and so on. That's a space where you can really grow.
You mean as a person if they want to get an employment?
Yeah.
But if you think of a company, why should they approach TietoEVRY?
Yeah, we are, as mentioned, we have, if I just mention the public sector, most of the communer and authorities and cities in the Nordics have been our customers. We are very Nordic, many of our competitors are not from the Nordics. Right. I think that means also that we are representing in many ways the Nordic values. I can say that we have a very respectful Nordic culture in TietoEVRY. Which you may not find in the same way in companies that come from other cultures, for example. And that means also we are aligning quite well, specifically with the customers that are very active here in the Nordics. So I don't know if I don't know if I should mention too many names.
No. We need to cut it a bit short. Sorry for interrupting all the time, but we have a limited amount of time. But perhaps you can just, close up a bit with, can you mention some interesting project you have, worked with, or you can mention from Tieto times?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have a couple of projects one is maybe we worked with in Finland with tunnel system, sensor fusion, LiDAR data, visional data, where we looked at anomalies in tunnels. So in traffic, we used all that information to essentially start automating the process of employing lots of people staring at monitors and seeing if something goes wrong, pedestrian or an accident or something, right? So we used that data and built essentially a product out of it. So that's one.
But just to linger a little bit longer on that, I mean, I guess in your way you want to at least do it semi-automatically in some way. So instead of having a person monitoring it 24/7, you can have some kind of more efficient way to do it, or how would you describe it?
Exactly right. So instead of having someone sitting in front of all these monitors, we have built a system which is taking all the camera data and the LiDAR data, which is the distance data, and we use that information then to lots, I don't know how much it was, terabytes of data that would then be analyzed, and it would then detect and identify if an anomaly would happen, such as a pedestrian being in the tunnel system, which isn't allowed, or an accident happening and so on. So, and that would essentially mean if you apply that in all the different tunnel systems, you have the ability to automate that process and potentially also automate the entire process, dispatching the appropriate type of personnel to these sites, right? To make it happen. So this was a good project, I would say. That was a very interesting one, where we also looked into sensor fusion more seriously, which can also be a tricky one, right? If you have different sensor inputs and get them together.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other projects?
Many. Yes. Another one was with a big retailer here in the Nordics, where we started predicting delivery times, for example, and buying behavior. So we would, for example, see when essentially make it easy for the staff and individual shops. Now, like the supermarkets on the corner, sometimes they have to have their staff on hold for the entire day for delivery to happen, to restack eggs and noodles and whatever. And instead we would give them a prediction saying, hey, this delivery truck will come between 12 and 12:30. So a bit like when you order your food on MartSmart or whatever it might be, or Mart.se or whatever. So and we would give them then essentially an expectation prediction, that the arrival, there would be a certain delivery, and that would then make the life of all the people in these supermarkets easier because they can schedule it more precisely. Nice. That's an example. We probably have bigger examples. Yeah, we had about 40, 45 projects on different levels, also in finance, fraud detection, forestry. I mentioned before, we looked at drones and making assessments about markets of trees, right, where you can detect from satellites or drones what the quality of the forest is, and so on and so on. So a whole bunch of interesting ones.
Drones that open up the thinking about other drones in recent days, but let's not go there, perhaps. Awesome. Should we move into more? We have like a quarter left or something. It will not have to be exactly on the market. But
I mean, I think I think we should take the time to really talk about some of the big topics around Europe and some and maybe the AI regulation or whatever you find interesting, Christian, because I think you have a unique perspective in you're some of the people in the Swedish AI community who has a very a bit more broader or international perspective, which I find really interesting if we can, maximize the value out of that on this podcast. So for instance, what we started with, I thought that was brilliant, thinking about how we can work with entrepreneurship in Sweden. So I think that was a great topic. So something else like that, I think we, giving the time we have, I think we should go for the high value type topics.
Let's move a bit more philosophical then, and perhaps back to one of the original questions, which was into meditation and definitions of AI. And that can also bring us to the AI Act and their definition of AI, which would be interesting to hear your thoughts about. But you mentioned in the beginning that there are some kind of similarity between how you define meditation and how you define AI. What do you mean with that?
Yes, exactly. I was about to ask if we can bring this up because you haven't even asked me how do you define AI? But I would say that one way to define AI, and I like this idea, is that you have a system that has an identity, that has a self-awareness, that knows that it exists and knows it is conscious about its body, potentially its mental state. It relates to concepts like the theory of mind, which is a big topic in this space. It combines my understanding of psychology. I mean, we are all so uncharted still mentally, right? I mean, we have a picture of our human body, but our mental capacities and ways of thinking, emotional ways, is still. So
let me ask you a challenging question then. Would you say that the Tesla car with the autopilot is conscious?
Well, and that gets us very quickly into to define by conscious. I think you could possibly, if you define it as having an awareness of its state, some very basic, very, very limited level. Very limited level. But if you ask me, will this be sufficient in order to have a discussion and dialogue as we have in this podcast? No, probably not. No, probably not. Maybe if you were talking about traffic conditions, you get a lot of very interesting concepts, but probably not to a level that we would consider interesting enough, for us to be defining it.
I think, there are different levels of consciousness, and I think some people over romanticize, the notion of it. I think just as we have general AI, you can have narrow AI. I think you can have general consciousness and narrow consciousness. And the Tesla car, of course, is not general in the sense of consciousness, but at least it is aware of itself and its surroundings and can take actions to, impact the environment. So in some kind of narrow sense, potentially, it is conscious, right?
Yes, it is, definitely. Yeah, I agree. Yes. And if I may add another, there's two other aspects that I consider being important. One comes a bit from Julia Pearl, who's my academic grandfather, who's looking very much at, do these systems understand causality and meaning of the activities that they perform? And with Stuart Russell, I had a discussion. There's this idea of, can an AI create its own goals? Because by and large, we're giving the AI its goals, right? But if it can create its own ones, then it becomes interesting. Yeah.
So, okay, you open up so many questions here. But then,
the list goes on and on.
If we just move to the AI Act then, and their definition of AI, there is a small passage in their definition of AI, which says that an AI system is something where the human defines the objective. And I find that really troublesome. Because that means that a system that the human has not given the objectives is suddenly not an AI system. Have you seen that? Or do you
I they updated it recently in December, right?
Yeah, but I think it's still there.
It's still there, this one?
Yeah.
Because in this, they had the, well, if they wrote that after our discussion, if they watch it, they will probably change it again. But it shows a bit like that it's a limited understanding, right, of what the AI is. And I had on Twitter, I had an exchange with Risto Silasma, who's the chairman of Nokia and so on. And one thing is, and his experience with telecom and so on is that you should possibly, if you think about regulating stuff, you should regulate outcome. And not
now you made me very happy to say this.
Yeah, I can understand very much the idea, because exactly what you say, right? You can, if you say, AI is heavily regulated and we don't want social ranking or some other
scoring,
undesirable things, right? But then you open the door for saying, we can potentially still achieve that with other measures other than AI, right? Why don't you define then a little bit more what you don't want to have? And then you say, that's what we don't want to encourage, whether it's AI or something else. That could be one angle.
But this, for me, I think for us in this room and for many in the industry, it's quite obvious that AI, one of its big promises is that it's a general purpose technology. So then the techniques of AI is general purpose. And then basically, what are you going to use it for becomes the problem. And therefore regulate outcome. And then when you start talking about fundamental techniques, you're on,
the slippery slope.
The slippery slope in so many ways, because you can think about that in so many different ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think the whole, it is a very tricky topic. I don't know how we can.
I think outcome-based is a clear winner.
Yeah,
that I can understand. I can understand that.
Perhaps we should give a quick background just for people that don't know AI Act properly, and please, fill in your view of this. But AI Act is a new regulation coming up from the European Commission, and it's currently undergoing a number of reviewing steps from all the countries and companies. And it has some troublesome way, but in short, you can say it's a way to define or regulate AI based on the risk that they pose. But they also have a definition of AI. Which I think is very
broad,
or questionable. And in short, they have these kind of phrases: is a system that can do X and Y, and they have if they have a humanly defined objective, and apparently for some reason that should be a part of the definition of AI, which is really absurd in my view. It would be very simple to circumvent the definition than to have an AI define its own goal, and suddenly you're not applicable to the regulation. And then they list in some kind of annex a number of technologies like statistical or rule-based systems and whatnot.
I mean, like
which basically includes any kind of
so they include more or less any system that has algorithms, which is down to relational databases. If I really try to understand.
Yeah, one part of the definition had to do with it having, what was it, search sorting algorithms, something like that. Very, very big. Which there's not one software.
There is not one software. There's not one relational database that doesn't fall under the AI Act.
Exactly.
That's problematic.
Exactly. No, I agree. That is not a simple one. I had another thought in my mind, but it just escaped me now.
But let's go quickly back to the meditation versus AI. Can you just go back a bit? What's your thinking? How do you find meditation? How do you find AI? And what's the similarity there?
Yeah, I think the point was really that, as I mentioned, we as humans have this phenomena, and it seems to be quite unique among all living beings that we know, that we have this illusion of self, that we believe of us as being something separate in our mind, that there's someone that takes actions, right? And in reality, you take most other animals, they don't have that. They don't have this construct of there being an Anders or Christian, and there seems to be an evolutionary reason for it. And meditation is one of those ways to start observing yourself more, right? And realizing, there's this whole discussion about duality in the meditation space, right? Is there really a self? And then, so like a thinker, is there like an actress, an observer? Does that exist, right? And as you think about it, it doesn't really. And that's not that I have come to it, because I think that is high level, that's guru level, if you meditate for 30 years. But I do understand the concept and I'm fascinated. And so I remember with one of my other psychology professors, we were even discussing if one of my thesis or maybe a book should be about having psychologists for AIs ultimately, right? Because once they are complex and they understand the world in ways which is highly complex and they form their own opinion, how do you get them back on track, making sense of the world, right? That was 20 years ago. And I think it goes along the lines of that's what I mean, having self-aware. If I may add, I had initially, I very much liked the definitions, and that I started with, which were in Stuart Russell's book, A Modern Approach of AI, which I think most of us know. If you haven't read it, it's a good intro book,
It's the most classical textbook, I guess, of AI these days.
Yeah, it's a good start. I generally recommend it. And, there's the description of what's an AI. It's like if it's a thinking human, acting humanly, or thinking or acting rationally. And so this goes back to things like, the Turing tests and other types of concepts, whether you build an AI based on our human psychology or is it an AI that's its own category of intelligence, right? But I think, often now we are here in an environment where we can lay this out open in practical concepts. If I'm switching quickly to entrepreneur and business and so on, and TietoEVRY and the startups that I'm supporting, it breaks down to something super practical, right? Can you solve a particular problem, and is it scalable? That's roughly, can you grow with it? Can you make profit? And then I think it helps a lot to have these ideas in the background, because it allows you to switch and to move. But of course, it breaks down to something very practical, right? It's like, does the company you deliver a service to have a proper data governance and data platform set up, or are they still at the beginning of this journey type thing, right? Which I'm sure you both have experienced a lot too.
But on this topic of the way we can enter into discussion of defining AI. You can come from the self-aware angle. You can come from the human-like intelligence angle. You can come from the angle that the computer learns and improves, how fast it can acquire intelligence. You can come from it from a new coding paradigm, that we are not really coding all the procedures. We are instructing the computer, and then it iterates and learns this way. So, and now we are literally talking a spectrum now, from machine learning type definitions all the way to something I don't know, very philosophical.
With your, psychological background, it would be interesting to hear what's your definition of intelligence in general, not about, AI or human intelligence. Just, how do you define intelligence? Do you have any preferred definition of that?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, there's at least these three components: having an identity, having the sense of self, being able to create goals, having the ability to change, to self-modify, which goes into the direction of machine learning, and what else did I say? That was one that I mentioned before. Goals, yeah, but that's one part. But a bit more tangible, I would say that if you're building a machine that has the ability to perform the same tasks that would require human cognitive, emotional, or physical abilities. So if you're going into this direction, it means you need to build a machine that has these types of abilities that are similar to ours.
But you also asked more in general about the definition of intelligence.
I have somewhat a problem. If you just compare it to humans, I would argue, have a very limited amount of intelligence. And it would be strange if we just limit AI to only be human intelligence.
Yes,
would you agree?
I agree. Yes, I agree. Definitely. Yeah. So our human intelligence is one type of intelligence. I think there are many intelligences, and a type of artificial intelligence is another one. It could just make sense of the world in a very different way, just like as animals would make sense of the world in a very different way. Potentially.
John LeCun, he is one of the pioneers of deep learning and head of AI at Facebook, etc. And he, is very annoyed when someone asks him, about AI and compare that to human intelligence, and says, do you understand how, extremely narrow the human intelligence and human brain is? And what AI could be so much more general than that.
Yep. And there's an example. One part of my thesis was actually also reflecting on this topic. Herbert Simon was looking a lot of bounded rationality. Also something to be Googled, if you like. But, he got a Nobel Prize, right? And he looked a lot at bounded rationality. It was a super important topic. And later on, Ariel Rubinstein, I used him a lot also in my thesis. It's essentially bounded rationality, meaning that when we are making decision, we are naturally limited by many factors in order to make a decision. And some of them are simply if you buy what is called homos economicus idea, right? You go into a supermarket and then you have 100 milks in front of you. The rational argument would be that you as a human have the ability to fully understand all the options, to have them fully evaluated, to rank them according to your preferences and your priorities, and then choose the best one. That's current economic theory, right? That's how our system is working. But of course, in reality, we are bound rational, meaning that we have limits in how we can compute all these, how we can access the information, how we can compute all these things. We won't be online all the time. None of us runs around, at least not consciously, making full priorities of the options that we have in front of us. Super. And that's this bounded rational behavior, which is limited in many ways. We are focused from a psychological point of view. There are many angles into it. What are we able to focus on? Where's our attention? Which also goes back to this meditation part, in fact, where our brain is very much geared towards focusing on specific things, but limited and really experiencing everything that goes around us. We just don't, right now, for example, we focus very much on our dialogue, but we don't take in everything else, the environment.
And we're losing so much information,
A lot, yeah. We process
very selective in the way that we take in information.
Exactly. The first perception part is huge. It's probably 100 times more, right? What we are now experiencing. And what we're processing in the end, what we focus on, which is a very tiny proportion of it, is a very different way of making sense of the world.
In some way, the human brain is awesome in forgetting stuff, right? To be able to focus on the important part.
Yes.
It would be fun to just hear what you think about François Chollet's definition. François Chollet is the he's a Google engineer and also created Keras, one of the top ML libraries, etc. But he wrote a paper in 2019 defining a new way to define intelligence. And in short, it was defined as skill acquisition efficiency, meaning you can have different skills. It can be to play chess, or it can be to classify images, or to drive a car or whatnot. But intelligence, in his view, is then the efficiency, how fast you can basically acquire that skill. And if you do that by manually, a human is manually program an AI system, that will be really slow, and you can't really adopt to changes in the world and the environment. If you have machine learning, at least you can adopt by data being fed into it, and you can learn automatically in some sense. And the faster you can do that, the more intelligent the system is. Would you like that definition, or what's your thought about that?
It wouldn't be complete. I'm not completely convinced that it covers all aspects, right? For example, it would miss the idea that, well, what type of skills would you learn? Which ones would you prioritize? Which ones, how much purpose do they have? How much meaning do they have? Like what's the goals of learning these skills? It's an important aspect. I would say it seems to me it's an important component, but there is not enough context. That's my gut feel when I hear this, right?
He would argue that it's like whatever generic skill there is, and the more generic it is, the more generic the intelligence would be in some sense. And some people, of course, is good at learning some stuff, and other people are good at learning other stuff. But the more generic you are, the more generic your intelligence would be in some sense.
Reminds me, actually, we had at TietoEVRY in the beginning a concept we referred to it as Tieto-cortex, which was along the lines of this idea that we would build AIs that are good at doing tasks and become very good at doing many, many different tasks, right? Maybe thousands of them, whatever it might be, sorting documents, finding documents, or, going through aisles in supermarkets and collecting data. And as you are combining it, you might start building something that as a combined approach, right, becomes intelligent. So that's one way to look at it. There's a whole bunch of questions when you go down that lane, right? How do you, which was one of the projects we had at TietoEVRY, when you have a robot that goes through supermarket aisles and detects what's in the shelves, right? How would you combine such a thing with finding documents in a big database or something, right? But essentially having different types of tasks, which the individual AIs would be doing well, and then combining it ultimately. Which goes to topics like multimodality, right? That's
a good topic. So if we were to, sorry for interrupting you, but the time is flying away. Time goes fast when you have fun. But one question could be, what do you see in coming 5 years, in terms of how AI will develop? Do you see any trends? You just mentioned one, which could be multimodality potentially. But what would you argue would be the big thing that I wouldn't say tech giants, but probably it is going to be them. But at least, research in AI will move towards. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, definitely. Just actually a couple of days ago shared it with our company too. I mean, certainly quantum. I see this is like one of the front runners. That's not something we will have in our homes anytime soon, but it is certainly something that's on the agenda. And that means in practice that we just have very, very different ways of approaching AI algorithms. But not only quantum, there's obviously other new architectures that deviate from the von Neumann architecture, right? So you have processors which can essentially utilize neural networks in a much more efficient way.
Are you thinking like neuromorphic kind of?
Precisely, exactly. I didn't want to throw all the words at the listeners, but exactly. So different architectures, I see them becoming important, particularly for neural network type approaches. I see a big trend towards privacy and privacy preserving AIs and machine learning algorithms.
We're talking about federated machine learning type topics.
Federated edge learning. These areas are in the making. I think for Europe, it will probably become increasingly more important because we are obviously having a certain setup where we need to ensure it. I think it's actually a good development because then we can also ensure privacy on an individual level. We'll bring up a whole bunch of very interesting research questions as well as practical questions. What else do we have? you mentioned multimodal. I think also in practical aspects, although we're all using Google Translate and other similar translation tools, I can see there being more need for translation, like natural language processing, where we have the immediate translation, like in discussions we have now, real time, and also professional translation. So at the EU level, for example, you have documents, these AI Act, and then you just turn all this into like in any language that you can possibly imagine with its context, right? That's usually something that the existing translation tools don't quite do. And
just to keep on the topic of translation, and I think that has been one of the core AI tasks from the start, from like 1954, I think, with the Georgetown experiment. And but it's always still harder than people think, and we still can't really reach human level of performance in translation. But one of the recent advances in translation is, of course, Google, and one of them is called GLAM, this kind of sparse large language model that instead of having a dense, super huge transformer model, they start to have this kind of pathways through a language model that is still super huge but still efficient in some ways. So it's sparse language models or sparse models in general. And then if you move to China, for example, they had this kind of Wudao 2.0 like last year, which was both sparse and multimodal and multitask. And this moves into what Google, I think, is speaking about, but haven't really published a paper about, which is called the Google Pathways. Have you heard about the Pathways project?
Yes, I have.
What do you think about it? I mean, in some sense, if you listen to Jeff Dean, etc., he seems to be speaking about specifically this. One is the sparseness of models. To keep them large and continue to scale them, but still being efficient. Also, it's about multimodality and extreme multitasking, like not one task, not 10 tasks, but thousands or tens or millions of tasks that a single model can handle. Do you see this as potential future trend as well, moving in this direction?
Yeah, I'm actually right online now after 2 glasses of wine. I try to remember the details of this particular approach, but I cannot recall all the details of it. But I think, I cannot.
Oh, the Pathways one or for?
Right now, both actually. I can't remember. It's
I think it's an example of how the tech giants are leaping ahead in extremely fast pace, and you can see the Chinas and the US tech giants that they have that I would argue they are 5 or 10 years ahead, and it's a bit scary.
No, that's definitely now a reality. It's both. It's Asia and the Americas. As many companies that have, they are certainly far ahead, and they are doing a serious effort on many of these topics for sure.
But maybe having inspiring last minute. What should Europe work on in order to catch up, or really? I mean, like to some degree, I don't think linearly we can't catch up. But what should we focus on, or how should we think to put ourselves on the map where we need to be?
Look, I think it's starting to become crunch time. I've been speaking to a number of leaders in Europe, both on the government level, relatively high, and also on an industry level in the big economies in Europe, right? Also in the Nordics, but in Europe. And I think there's a discussion around a time frame of 10 to 20 years where we have time for us to get our
shit together.
You said it.
I helped you there. So
Thank you. Exactly. No, to be very serious about it. And that means in practice, I think we do need to be, very willing to take just bigger risks, which means that we may also lose a lot.
This is the bottom line, risk-taking entrepreneurship.
I think I come always back to it, because I can tell you this, as I'm having discussions with companies, many of the ones we know, many of the biggies here in the Nordics and in Europe, it comes down to the board and it comes down to the leadership, in my view. The board owns the company and they set the direction, right? As you know, I mean, just it's a bit like 101 company leadership, right? But if you You can take any company, but they are owning it and they want the company to go down a certain direction. If they say to an established company, we want you to do what you have always done. We want you to have 5% dividend every year. Right? Then that company and the CEO and the leadership will not take risks. They will be doing everything possible to achieve 5% dividend, 5% increase in revenue or whatever it might be. But they cannot afford to say, no, we change the company, going away from the way we always have done things to doing something fundamentally different.
First principle again.
Yeah, it goes back to that's as in the economic capitalistic system, it goes back to that level where the owner, which is almost going back to the level of a startup or company, which set the direction in the very beginning, needs to decide what company do we want to be in 3 or 5 years time and what does it take. And usually it's not like, yep, we want to be the number one AI company in, let's say, in the fashion space, H&M, Zalando and so on, but we still want to have 5% increase every year, right? This is not working. You need to break stuff. You need to do something very different. And and I understand the situation. If you have in the board of these big companies pension funds, where all our pension money is in, they're conservative funds, right? They don't go in and say, yep, we gamble all the money away. So, you need to, I think, and there's an example recently, I'm still looking into it, but ICA here has actually decided to take themselves off the share market. I don't know if you knew that, but it's a very interesting move. And I know another company that did that in the Netherlands. It's a publicly listed company. They said, look, if you want to change, now I need to read up more on it, and I encourage everyone to read up more on it. But by and large, if you want to change, we cannot be publicly listed because we need to have so much risk assessments and be quite conservative in the way we approach this area. We need to remove ourselves from that, and now we need to restructure and take bigger risks. That's I feel this is one part, and the other big component is, of course, you need to understand that stuff. So I tell many CEOs, hey, hire the best AI person you can get your hands off, someone you can have a good communication with. Have with that person as many fikas and coffees as you can possibly have to have constructive dialogues as to how to reorganize your company, let's say. So it's very important because I've heard so many stories where the companies have found ways of putting a lot of money aside on AI projects, but to be a little bit critical here, they were a little bit more for show than actually turning the whole company around.
I really like that. I think more companies should be, not focusing so much as they do on the next quarter or on the current year, but actually thinking 5 years ahead or more and think, what can we do today to make us the leader in 5+ years?
Yeah. And there's a huge amount of opportunity. If you compare this to medicine, which is a 1,000-year-old discipline, we are now at the start of 70 years of doing AI. The opportunities are huge. We will change dramatically as a society, and business will change. So if people see that, and I hope they will see more and more of it, solving cancer, solving energy crisis problems, all these types of things are on the agenda for these AI-driven algorithms. So I think the opportunities are fantastic. We will go to Mars with the help of technologies like AI, for sure.
And I really like. Bottom line, our system, our ways of thinking needs to permeate in 2 different directions. So the ecosystem, we need to work on it in order to take risk in entrepreneurship. So everything from regulations to our investors, to our startup, that's number one. And the other one, I think you're nailing it when you said, the best advice I can give to any CEO is to get yourself your own AI person close to you that is your trusted advisor, because you fundamentally need to organize your operations differently. Yeah. Even to the simplest point, we cannot have the traditional IT supply, IT demand model anymore. The traditional IT steering will not fly when you have a business data, AI software value chain. So how do you build that organization? Yeah. And here we have a huge gap that the people in power, not only the boards, but on the export, the operating board management team, they are not the management teams are not balanced or educated, so they don't really know how to run a software company.
Yep.
And essentially that what we are saying, you need to infuse data AI software in your core business, not part of IT anymore, by the way. So, and this starts with knowing what to organize for, and they don't. They simply don't. So the people who knows the data and AI data science, even the great guys in our nice companies, they are not in the right rooms to make the organizational decisions.
Exactly.
So we underutilize the value of these people we have in our big corporations. I mean, like, that's my rant. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. It's really how much of these new technology, digital AI data, how close do they come to the core of the company's products and services? And that's super important. And that's also for me a bit the definition of what is an AI first company or an AI company versus one that isn't. And by and large, you can say, well, if you remove AI from the core product or from the company altogether, can this company still exist? And you know, if it's not part of it, or like it doesn't make any difference, then it's probably not an AI company, right? But if you take that away, all these algorithms that a Google has, I think Google will have a lot of problems.
To say the least.
I really love
small understatement.
You get me going here, Christian, because this is so good the way you framed it, because it takes us into another classical conversation. What's the difference between BI analytics and proper AI? And basically, with your definition, you know what? A company can survive without its BI and advanced analytics reports as insights on the side. But if you have a recommender system as part of your core operational processes, your company will die. So this is a huge difference that I still have a lot of conversation with that, you know, you're working with AI. Yeah. So this is all about insights. Yes and no. Because you get, it's sort of an analog mindset on analytics as support, IT as support.
Very passive. Yeah.
That's very analog view of, no, we are talking about data, AI software, part of core operations.
Yeah. So no one, and I think most people in the US and so on, to underline what you said, very true. Things like BI analytics are not the AI that I have in mind. For me, AI is when you do have a system that starts being much more autonomous in its decision making. So you don't have first a screen where it shows you graphs and then you make a decision as a human. You can certainly use machine learning algorithms to present the graphs, but you're not having a self-driving car, or something similar, or something that makes a decision on a factory floor. That's when AI comes in, or recommendation engines on Amazon, or on Spotify, or Google search. That's where you have AI, because it does a fundamental, significant part of the decision-making process, or any process, any part of the product, autonomous and intelligent. That's when it gets interesting. And for that, you need to be smart about it. You cannot, and this is almost another topic, but we do have too many folks in Europe that are not really understanding this technology deep enough, unfortunately. And then you have advisors, you have people in companies and so on, which are giving just the wrong advice.
This is, you're getting me both goosebumps and you're getting me going, because I get so frustrated on some of these topics. And we are talking about well-renowned management consultancies who has not really left the BI, advanced analytics space yet. And I can give you an insider view of, how it works. I'm not going to go into any names, but, you have a whole management consultancy, a big and nice brand. And, now AI is the hype. So we get someone in to give 1 hour, to our guys so we can go out and sell AI. And they have no fucking clue. And these are guys that are unfortunately giving advice to our CEOs. I'm
very
really
positive
frustrated
here. Yeah.
No. Sorry for that.
I agree. It's on two levels actually, because many of the strategy consultancies are under fire. As I said before, why do you need those if you have a full system that gives advice? That's one. And the other one is exactly what you said there, right? You don't have so many people that have that knowledge, that can give that advice to the CEOs. It's essentially a quicker way of making money and then confusing everything. And if I may say, right, I do medicine. I do know medicine and this field very well now for 15 years, right? I'm at the Karolinska Institute and so on. I see many parallels. Medicine in the early days, there were a lot of quacksalvers, folks that are selling snake oil, right? It's just, and it was unregulated. It was not everyone that said, I can do medicine. What do you want to have?
Exactly.
You know, what do you want ailment? Do you want me to heal?
We
No
slap
problem.
AI in every single product.
Yeah. So very easy, but and then it took a bit of time to start putting a bit of control over it, right? So now today, when you are performing a medical practice, you need to be first of all, you need to have an education. I need to be a medical doctor or surgeon or something of that sort. Then you need to be registered, and that's all regulated also. So I'm not suggesting regulation is not necessarily something I hope we have too much of, but it means that someone that does perform this as an AI expert or data scientist, they have gone through this and they have enough knowledge knowing how all this works. So
let's hope that AI becomes as mature as medicine is today.
No, but
right?
I think this is the positive. If you flip this to the super positive end note, we feel frustration today because we are experiencing all the baby sicknesses of a new era. This is the baby sicknesses of a new era, of a new industry. And we think we have experienced a lot, but in all honesty, this is typical barnsjukdomar. What do you call it in English?
Children's sickness. Yeah. People will laugh about it in 50 years' time. They will look back at this and will just wonder, wow, these guys, all over the place.
Yeah, quacksalver and snake oil sailors. I love that.
Yeah,
a bit extreme,
but I think you can. I'm trying to find a good positive ending here.
Yeah, sorry for you, but
this,
you pushed my
we're working on trying.
You push my buttons
exit.
in a positive way, and sorry.
The lack of rationality, or the bounded, if we call it that, rationality that do exist today, especially in management teams about AI, perhaps can also be seen as an opportunity.
Yes,
meaning that if you have a great idea and you want to do a startup. That could actually be something that a lot of other traditional companies don't think about because they are not sufficiently mature or rational about how to do it. So that means that there are a huge amount of opportunities for any startup, or if a person have an idea, to actually make a really successful startup. Would you agree?
Yes. And that's when you combine that with a good investor that believes in it and gives it a 10, 15 year time frame, deep tech type approach. Then we're talking.
And maybe this is the real way for Europe then, that we will not solve the AI divide by the leaders from the industrial era. So, and this goes back to Google and are not afraid of the next big competitor. They're really more afraid of the next young startup coming from nowhere and completely flipping and disrupting a niche. So maybe that's the way to really fix Europe, is not to rely on the big giants, but relying on a startup scene.
Yeah. And particularly if these ones have to demonstrate that they are successful in their own industry. All the eyes are on them. If it's a forest industry or pharmaceutical industry, if they are taking on board a new technology and they're developing a new drug or they have a new forestry approach, but they fail, they lose significantly more than a type of tech company or even a startup company, right? Because everyone looks at them. They cannot fail in developing.
And if you're too big to fail, so to speak, if you can't fail, you can't really take the risk. You can't do the pivot. And this is something I think we should applaud. Now there's huge tech giants like Amazon or some, but they literally put their whole company on the line 3 or 4 times in the different stages. They made some big bets. And I think that's a good positive ending, that we have so much opportunity to start. So basically, that's where we need to get the investors in. We need to get everybody to get excited about, building new companies.
Awesome. We have so many topics we haven't been able to cover. I would love to have gone more into quantum mechanics, how we can use quantum AI potentially in the future. And I potentially have a slightly different view than you, but we'll take that in the after work, I think. And, the singularity and, the AI divide, so many other topics we would love to cover. But perhaps some other time.
We need to have you to come back here with your friend from...
Bring him over here once the pandemic is over and so on. Yeah.
Christian, what's next in your life? What's going on personally, professionally? What's happening in coming months?
Yeah. So I was about to say, I will be part of a company that has a big ambition. and I want to be part of a project. Maybe it is not a company, but some 10x, 100x type idea, right? Yeah. Something that really makes a mark and takes us around the globe. That's really where I really want to be part of. And that's why I probably speak a little bit about, well, who has a rational risk willingness? Who is like entrepreneurial? Is there enough money behind it? So that's really what interests me in companies now and in opportunities. That's why I'm very startup friendly. You know, I'm supporting 2 startups. I like the idea. The team is there, but myself also, right? If we get together a good team here and we have the right support, that's something I would love to do. There are opportunities, and I mean that's what I love to do. I love, and then one area that I particularly like is sort of medicine, as I mentioned before. If you can do something really significant, like solving cancer or a real moonshot project, literally like, you know, going to Mars and so on. Most of the things I mentioned are not happening here in Europe, right? Most of these ideas are happening in other countries, but that's something I would love to be involved in. That's something that
sounds like something is
happening,
right?
Maybe it does. Yeah, it does. It does. Yes, we're discussing things. Yeah, but that is something I would love to get much.
We have to get you back on the show, you know, once that's get realized.
Yeah.
See what that happens.
Once Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk have transferred the money to the company, we are talking again.
Awesome. Anyone that you would recommend to come on this podcast? I think you also already mentioned at least one. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking now Nordics and global, but Iyad Rahman, as I mentioned before, I think once we get him, once he's here, we should try to make that happen. Also in the Nordic, Risto Silasma, I mentioned him before. He's the chairman of Nokia. You can maybe talk to him. Yeah. And he is one of those engineers. I'm quite fascinated about founders that are still CEOs in companies and are active. And he's one of those engineers. He went over to Stanford and actually learned much more about what machine learning is. And he's a CEO and chairman of huge companies, right? So very good. He was the one that in 2010 made Nokia work with Microsoft together. And so he had a huge role. He's very well known in Finland. So he's good. He's really laying out clear ideas about how this whole AI space, and is also supporting startups and so on. Could mention many more, but I'm thinking
from Stockholm. So for our nearest future, so do you have somebody from Stockholm?
Now I was about go more international. Actually, let's see.
That is awesome, but still we have the Omnicron now and then Deltacron and Transformicon and Rubicon and
Okay, well maybe. Can I go to Denmark?
Yeah.
Okay, Denmark. There is a company. Corti, Lars Malør. You know,
Corti.
That sounded exciting.
So he's been presenting in Data Innovation, I think.
Lars is good. He's a CTO.
They were nominated in the DR Awards.
And they were also nominated and got an award by the EU. So they're good guys. He's a good guy. He's both. He has a PhD in machine learning, but also does very practical stuff, how to bring this out.
That the company that also had like an efficient pipeline for just reproducing paper results or something? I think it was Corti.
I don't think so. No, but they are the ones that are doing, when you calling now the emergency hotline, SOS alarm and so on, there is an AI tool in the background that, I now simplified, but transcribes what you're saying so that it can complete what the manual operator is typing in. And that's really, really a powerful technology. And in addition to it, it also tests does a heart check essentially on remotely. So a whole bunch of cool things. But he would be worth doing more here. I mean, there are good colleagues in the US. I mentioned them now quickly. One is Andrew Nang. I know him from. If he comes over, should he ever come over here, he should come over and you should talk to him. He's just very good to lay out these ideas. And also another person that I really admire. You can talk to him about 2 topics: meditation, also, and him being very, very knowledgeable in AI is Anand Rao. So he's a global head of artificial intelligence at PwC in Boston. And he explains things so intuitively, and he has so much knowledge, and he's a very humble person in explaining this area, and very open-minded.
Spell his last name?
Rao, R-A-O. Yeah. He's actually also a senior fellow at the Nordic Artificial Intelligence Institute.
Oh, okay.
But he's a good guy. He's talking to many important people also, including the Indian government and so on. But he's in Boston. He was one of the leaders at the Australian AI Institute back in the days with Michael Georgiev and so on. And driving a lot of these concepts. For example, he was behind this report, when the first assessments came out, how big the AI market is, and PwC assessed it at 16.7 trillion something.
16.7.
Anand.
Anand said, that's about. No, he's very good. Top team.
Anders will like him very much. He has a picture of Steve Jobs in the background.
Yeah, here we go.
Very ironic statement. Just want to make that clear. Okay, good.
So cool.
Awesome, Christian. That was a really, really amazing list of people. So thank you very much for that.
No worries at all.
And thank you very much for the time here, even though it was limited and we had so many more topics to cover. We could have gone on forever, and we will go on, hopefully, for some time more off camera. And hopefully discuss so much more. But, awesome to have you here, and best of luck with your future career then, and all your interesting upcoming projects and whatnot.
Thank you. It was a great pleasure to be here. Super topics. And as you said, we sort of scratched
the surface. But what I also like, and maybe that's when to get the feeling of a person's career is a lot also about shaping views and ideas and all that and experiences. So I think there's so many rabbit holes to go down throughout discussing the backgrounds that we never talk about. But I love that with this show that we sort of get to know you.
Very nice. Yeah. Thank you for all the good questions.
Cool.
Great stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone.